Uh-oh. Oh no! I'm bouncing. No, 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 no. Why am I bouncing? Why is bouncing the first thing on here? That's not the. Y'all saw nothing. Y'all saw nothing there. Totally haven't forgotten about the fact that. No, not again! God damn it. Y'all saw nothing. Scuff with the first test of using this setup. So you can't tell. Yes, I am more alive. I am blinking now. And yes, I do have a bounce thing. It was mainly just as a test to see how that would look like, but maybe it'll be a redeem. I don't know. You'll never know. Okay, that was supposed to put me back. Oh, right. It doesn't. The extensions don't like to work when I'm clicked into OBS for some reason, so we're going to attempt that not be a thing. Also, if the blinking gets a little too annoying, I might turn that off too. This might make a state where I'm just not blinking for a bit, because I am going to be talking, so. But we'll see how that goes. There are a couple other fun things I can work with later and or figure out once things have all been good enough. Because like I said, gaming stuff should be coming back within the next, let's see, next 2 weeks, give or take. Depending on how things go, and then after that, we'll be all set and ready to go. As I scour my books for things to find and all that. So yeah. Oh yeah, I'll also next book stream. I'll be sure to have like the book and have my eyes going somewhere, so that way I'm not always looking at you and not blinking at you. It's been a long week and a long week of figuring out programs. Now I'm realizing I'm almost blinking almost every other time my avatar blinks. It's very interesting. But we're gonna go with that, regardless. push that in. Twist myself this way. I have a new mic set up, so this is going to be a little bit different. Actually, no, maybe not entirely different, but I think this setup works a little bit nicer. Oh, yeah, that's right. I have a band-aid on my thumb, kind of hard to do that. All right. Like I said on my Twitter post, earlier today or this week, we are going to finish the Hobbits. We are like on chapter 12, and there are. Where's the table of contents? We're chapter 12, and there are 7 chapters left. Granted, it takes me about a little bit to get through them, but considering though, I think these chapters are very, yeah, I think these next couple chapters are very short. So we're just gonna blaze right on through. I'm gonna attempt to make this a little bit better because I still haven't figured it all out just yet. Hold on. You're gonna see some stuff you don't need to see right now. Move that down so that way. There we go. There we go. I think that might work a little bit better. Or I'll just need to get closer, which will probably work a little bit better. All right, and now we get rid of it. Let me minimize this. At least for now. I know that I don't want to discuss like technical mumble jumbo as much as I normally do, but we're gonna get through this. So, hoy, let us begin. Chapter 12. Inside Information. For a long time, the dwarf stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, and a hobbit full of courage and resource far exceeding in size. And if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance. Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. You are familiar with Thorin's style and importance and occasions. You are familiar with Thorin's style on important occasions. I don't want to give you any more of it. Though he went on a good deal longer than this. It certainly was an important occasion for Bilbo. Important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. Zell, I know you're excited, but read the book slowly. I don't know why the lead didn't go there, but we're things to work on. Fix that later. Where am I? Patient. By now, he was quite familiar with Thorin too, and he knew what he was driving at. If you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin, Thorín's son Oakenshield, may your beard grow even longer, he said crossly. Say so at once and have done. I must refuse. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of 2 messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so that I am, I think, already owed some reward. But third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I shall begin to trust my luck, more than I used to in old days. He meant last spring before he left his own house, but it seems centuries ago. But anyway, I think I will go, and have a peep at once and get it over. Now, who's coming with me? He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Keely and Keely looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but others made no pretense of offering. Except old Balin, the lookout man who was rather fond of the Hobbit. He said he would come inside at least, and perhaps a bit of the way too, really to call for help if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it if he would. But they would have done their best to get him out of trouble, if he got into it. As they did in the case of trolls at the beginning of their adventures, or they had any particular reasons for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with great idea of the value of money. Some are trickery and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but decent enough. People like Thornton and Company, if you don't expect too much. Stars were coming up from behind him in a pale sky barred with black. And the hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier than he expected. There was no this was no goblin entrance or rough wood elf cave. It was a passage made by dwarves at the height of their wealth and skill, straight as a ruler, smooth floored and smooth sided, going with a gentle, never wavering slope direct to some distant end in the blackness below. After a while, Balin bid Bilbo good luck and stopped where he could see the faint outline at the door. And by a trick of the echoes of the tunnel hear the rustle of the whispering voices of the others outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than a hobbit's care to make no sound, he crept noiselessly down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a different hobbit from the one that had ran out with different hobbit from the one that had run out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief. It's been a long day. Sentence is weird. Alright. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosened his dagger in its sheath and tightened his belt and went on. Now you're in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went and put your foot right into the night of the party. And now you gotta pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and am, said the least tookish part of him. Absolutely no use for dragon guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever. If only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home. He did not wake up, of course, but still went on till all sight of the door behind him had faded away. He was alone altogether. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought he was beginning to feel warm. Is it the kind of glow I seem to see? Is that the kind of glow I seem to see right down there? He thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew, till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light steadily getting redder and redder. Also, it was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floating up and past him, he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears. A sort of bubbling, like the noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with a rumble as of gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterward were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone, before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt, go on he did. And you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel, an opening of much the same size and the shape as the door above, though it peeps the hobbit's little head. Before him lies the great bottomless cellar, or dungeon hall of the ancient dwarves right at the mountain's root. It is almost as dark. It's almost dark so that vastness can only be dimly guessed by rising from side rocky floor. There is a great glow, a glow of smog. I don't really think dragons glow that much, if I'm being honest. Of course, to be fair, I don't really hang out with dragons that much. Well, there are a few I'm acquainted with, but I do not hang out with dragons that very often. I'll have to fix that. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon. Of course, it's a red dragon. Fast asleep, a thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs, and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretched away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver stained in the ruby light. Smog lay with wings, with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partly on one side so the hobbit could see his underpants, and his long pale belly, crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lay on his costly bed. Behind him were the walls where nearest could dimly see in coats of mail, helms, axes, swords, spears hanging, and in the row stood great jars and vessels, filled with wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away, no description at all. There were no there are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the word was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tale and sing of dragon hoards before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment, and with desire of the dwarves he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian at the gold beyond price and count. He gazed at what seemed for an age, or drawn almost against his will. He stole from the shadow of the doorway across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him, the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace even in his sleep. He gasped at the two-handed cup, as heavy as he could carry, and cast one fearful eye upwards. Smog, stirring a wing, opened a claw with a rumble of his snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, but the dragon did not wake. Not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, laying there in his stolen hall, while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating, a more fevered shaking was in his legs. Then he was going down, but he still clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, "I've done it. That'll show him more like a grocer than a burgher indeed." Well, we'll hear no more of that. Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air. It was midnight and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, or how they praised him and patted him on the back, put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarves were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain under, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked from closing with a stone. But up from a long tunnel came the dreadful echoes from far down in the depths of a bellowing and trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Then the dwarfs forgot their joy and their confident boasts of a moment before cowered down in fright. Smog was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations. If you live near him, dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know an ounce's rule, especially after long possession, and Smog was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream in which a warrior, altogether insignificant in size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly, to a doze, and from a doze to a wide waking. There was a breath of strange in the air in his cave,
Could there have been a draught from a little hole? He never felt quite happy about it, though. It was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion and wondered why he never blocked it up. Of late, he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of knocking sounds from far above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck too stiff. And then he missed the cup. Thieves, fire, murderer. Such a thing had not happened as he first came to the mountain. His rage passed this description. The sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had, but never before used or wanted. His fire belched forth, the hall smoked. He shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at the little hole, and the coiling of his length together. And then coiling his length together, roaring like a thunder underground. He spread from his deep lair through its great door, out into the huge passages in the mountain palace, up towards the front gate, to hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief, and torn and trampled him was his one thought. He issued from the gate. The waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared, blazing into the air, and settled on the mountain top, in a spot of green and scarlet flame. The dwarfs heard the awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the wall of the grassy torrents, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have been killed if it had not been for Bilbo once again. Quick, quick, he grasped. The door, the tunnel. It's no good here. Roused by these words, they were not just about to creep inside the tunnel when Buford gave a cry. My cousins, Bumber and Buford, we've forgotten them. They're down in the valley. They will be slain, and all of our ponies, too. All our stollies lost, moaned the others. We can do nothing. Nonsense, said Thornton, recovering his dignity. We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin. And you too, Feely and Keely. The dragon shan't have us all. Now, others, where are the ropes? Be quick. Those were perhaps the worst moments that they had yet. Okay, that's how I read that right. Okay. The horrible sounds of Smaug's anger were echoing in the stony hollows far above. At any moment, he might come blazing down, or fly whirling round and find them there, near the perilous cliff's edge, hauling madly up on the ropes. Up came Buford, and still all was safe. Up came Bumber, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and then danger was upon them. A whirring noise was heard. A red light torched and painted red light touched the points of standing rocks. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging their bundles when Smaug came, hurtling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flames, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the grass before the door and drove in through the crack they had left and scorched them as they lay hid. Flickering fires leaped up, and black rock shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he passed again. The ponies were screamed with terror, burst their ropes, and galloped off wildly. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them and was gone. That'll be the end of our poor beast, said Thorn. Nothing can escape Smaug once he sees it. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay unless one of us fancies trampling the long open miles back to the river with Smaug on the watch. It was not a pleasant thought. They had crept further down the tunnel, and there they lay and shivered, thought it was warm and stuffy until dawn came. Pale through the crack of the door, every now and again through the night they could hear the roar of the flying dragon grow and then pass and fade as he hunted round and round the mountainsides. He guessed from the ponies and the traces of the camps he had discovered the men had come up the river and the lake and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing. But the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high-walled bay had kept out out his fiercest flames. Long had he hunted in vain, till the dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to his golden couch to sleep and gather new strength. He would not forget or forgive the theft, not in 1,000 years. Not if 1,000 years turned him into a smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent, he crept back into his lair and half closed his eyes. When the morning came, the terror of the dwarfs grew less. They realized that dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, and that was no good no good giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away now, as Thorn pointed out. Their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smog relaxed his watch significantly for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but could not think of a way of getting rid of Smog, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo had felt inclined to point out. Then, as the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the hobbit, blaming him for what had first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smog's wrath so soon. What else do you suppose a burglar is to do? Asked Bilbo angrily. I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is a warrior's work. But to steal treasure, I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with a whole horde of Thor on my back? Thorio on my back? Is there any grumbling to be done? I think I may have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I'm sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made a vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want 100 years to bring it all up. If I was 50 times as big and Smog as tame as a rabbit. After that, of course, the dwarfs begged his pardon. What then do you propose we do, Mr. Baggins? Asked Thorn politely. I have no idea at the moment. If you mean about removing the treasure, then obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck in getting rid of Smog. Getting rid of dragons is not at all in my line. But I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all and wish I was safe back at home. And never mind that for a moment. What were you going to do now today? Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but stay where we are. By day, we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take air. Perhaps before long or two, we chosen to go back to the store by the river or replenish our supplies. But in the meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now, I will make you an offer. I've got my ring and will creep down this very noon. Then, even if Smog sought out to be napping, and see what he's up to, perhaps something will turn up. Even Worm has his weak point, as my father used to say, though I'm sure it was not for personal experience. Naturally, the dwarfs accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become a real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountains. He did not like it, of course, but it was not bad now. He knew, more or less, what was in front of him. Had he known more about dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door, almost closed, soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that the smoke on a gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near the lower door. There was only the very faintest gold to be seen. Old Smog is weary in his sleep, he thought. If he can't see me, and won't hear me, cheer up, Bilbo. He had forgotten, or never heard about dragons' sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they keep half and I open watching while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Gonna have to keep that in mind. Smog certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark with a scaly snore, more than a whiff of unseen steam. When Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance, he was just about to step out onto the floor when he caught a sudden thin pierce of ray of red from under the drooping lid of Smog's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of the ring, then Smog spoke. Well, thief, I smell you. I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along. Help yourself again. There is plenty to spare. But Bilbo was quite so unlearned in dragon lore at all, and if Smog hoped to get him to come nearer so easily, he was disappointed. No, thank you, Smog the Tremendous, he replied. I did not come for presents. I only wish to have a look at you and see if you are truly as great as the tales say. I did not believe them. Did you know? Said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. Truly songs and tales, while utterly short of the reality, O Smog, the chiefest and greatest of calamities. You have nice manners for a thief and a liar, said the dragon. You seem familiar with my name, but I seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask? You may indeed. I come from under the hill. And under the hills and over the hills my path led, and then through the air. I am he that walks unseen. So I can well believe, said Smog, but that is hardly your usual name. I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the singing fly. I was chosen for the lucky number. Lovely titles, sneered the dragon, but lucky numbers don't always come off. I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them alive again from the water. I come from the end of bag, and no bag went over me. That doesn't sound so credible, scoffed Smog. I am a friend of bears and the guests of eagles. I am a ring wearer and lucky wearer. I'm a bear rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smog, but do not let your imagination run away with you. Going down just to make sure that my mic levels are getting caught here. This, of course, is the way to talk to dragons. If you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, well, shit. You know, now I really wish I'd read this book earlier. Oh, well. Which is wise. And do not want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also wise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddle talk, and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here Smog did not understand at all, though I expect you do, since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring. But he thought he understood enough and chuckled in his wicked inside. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself. Lakemen, some nasty scheme of those miserable tub trading lakemen. Or my lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age. But I will soon alter that. Very well, old Barrow Rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrow was your pony's name. Or maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you do not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I shall give you one piece of advice for your own good. Don't have more to do with dwarves than you can help. Dwarves, said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smog. I know the smell and taste of dwarf no better. Don't tell me that I'd eat a dwarf wooden pony and not know it. You'll come to a bad end if you go with such friends, thief barrel rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so for me. But he did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make at all. A hobbit smell. was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose I suppose you got a fair price from that cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they're skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking for them. And you will get a fair share. Oh, and will you get a fair share? Don't you believe it? If you get out alive, you'll be lucky. Bilbo was now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smaug's roving eye, seeking for him in the shadows, flashed across him, he trembled, and with uncountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself, and tell this truth to Smaug. In fact, he was in gravest danger of coming under the dragon spell. But plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smaug the Mighty, he said. Not Goat alone brought us hither. You admit us, laughed Smaug. Why not say us 14 and be done with it, Mr. Lucky Number? I am pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts besides my gold. In that case, you may perhaps not altogether waste your time. I did not know if it had occurred to you that even if you could. Oh wait, no, it's not. That's not Smaug's voice. It's indented. Thinking. You think it's something. I didn't know if this occurred to you. Even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, could not get very far. Not much use to the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me. Have you ever thought of the catch? A 14 share, I suppose, or something like that. Those were the terms, eh? What about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls? Smaug laughed out loud. He had a wicked and wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected the lakemen were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that his young days had been called Ezergroth. You would hardly believe, but poor Bilbo was really taken aback. So far, all his thoughts and energies had been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered to wonder how many treasures was to be removed. Certainly never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way to Bag End under the hill. Now a nasty suspicion began to grow in his mind, and had the dwarves forgotten the his important point too? Were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect of the dragon talk has on the inexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smaug had rather an overwhelming personality. I'll tell you, he said in his effort to remain loyal to... Oh wait, that's Bilbo. Ah. I'll tell you, he said in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and to keep his end. That gold was only an aftermath with us. We came over hill and under hill by waving wind for revenge. Surely you'll Smaug the unassailable wealthy. You must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smaug really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor. While far up the tunnel, the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. Revenge! He snorted with the light of his eyes lit in the hall from the floor to the ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead. Where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, Lord of Dale, is dead. I have eaten his people like wolf among sheep. Where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I lay low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was young, I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong, strong thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are like swords. Claws are like spears. The shock of my tail a thunderbolt. My wings a hurricane. And my breath death. I've always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, that dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of their chest. But doubtless one so fortified. Hey, who had thought of that? The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Your information is adequate, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade shall pierce me. I might have guessed, said Bilbo. Truly there will nowhere be the equal of Lord Smog the Impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds. Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smog, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his peculiar undercovering on his previous visit and was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said. What do you say to that? Dazzling, marvelously, perfect, flawless, staggering, exclaimed Bilbo aloud. What thought was inside? Old fool, why is there a large patch in the hollow of his left breast as bare as a snail out of its shells? After that, after he had seen them, Mr. Baggins' one idea was getting away. And Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away. Well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer, he said, or keep you from such much needed rest. Ponies take some catching, I believe, after a long start. And so do burglars, he added, with a parting shot as he darted back and fled up the tunnel. It was an unfortunate remark, for the dragon spouted terrible flames after him. And fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of the Smog was thrust against the open behind. Luckily, the whole head and jaws could not squeeze in, but the nostrils sent forth fire and vapor to pursue him, and he was nearly overcome and stumbled blindly not in great pain and fear. He had a feeling rather. He had been really. He had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smog, but his mistake at the end shook him into bitter sense. Never laugh at life dragons, Bilbo, you fool, he said to himself, and it became a favorite saying for his later, and passed into a proverb. You're nearly through this adventure yet, he said, and that was pretty true as well. The afternoon was turning into evening, and when he came out again and stumbled and fell in a faint on the doorstep, the dwarves revived him, doctored his scorches as well as they could. But it was a long time before the hair on the back of his head and heels grew properly again. It had all been singed and frizzled down to the skin. And in the meanwhile, his friends did their best to cheer him up, and they were eager for a story, especially wanting to know why the dragon had made such an awful noise and how Bilbo had escaped. But the hobbit was worried and uncomfortable, and they had difficulty getting anything out of him. On thinking things over, he was now regretting some of the things he had said to the dragon, and was not eager to repeat them. The old thrush was sitting on a rock nearby with its head cocked to one side, listening to what all has been said. It shows what an ill temper Bilbo was in. He picked up a stone and threw it into the thrush, which merely fluttered aside and came up back. Drat the bird, said Bilbo crossly. I believe he is listening, and I don't like the look of him. Leave him alone, said Thorin. The thrushes are good and friendly. This is a very old bird indeed, and maybe the last left of an ancient breed that used to live about here, tamed at the hands of my father and grandfather. They were a long-lived and magical race, and this might be even one of those that were alive then. A couple hundred couple of hundreds of years or more ago. The men at Dale used to have a thick of understanding their language, and used to have them as messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere. Well, he'll have news to take to Lake Town, all right. Right, if that is what he is after, said Bilbo. Though, I do not suppose that there are any people left in that trouble with the Thrush language. Why? What has happened? Did you get on with your tale? So Bilbo told them all he could remember, and confessed that he had a nasty feeling that the dragon guessed too much from his riddles, and added to the camps and ponies. I'm sure he knows we come from Lake Town, and had help from there. I have a horrible feeling that his next move may be in that direction. I wish to goodness I had never said that about Barrel Rider. It would make even a blind rabbit in these parts think of think of the lake man. Well, it cannot be helped. It is difficult not to slip in talking to a dragon. Or so I have heard, said Balin, anxious to comfort him. I think you did very well, if you ask me. You found out one very useful thing at any rate, and got home alive, and that is more than most can say of who have words with the likes of Smog. It may be mercy or a blessing of it, yet. To no one of the bare patches in the old worm's diamond waistcoat. That turned the conversation, and they began to discussing dragon slaying's historical, dubious and mythical, and the various sorts of stabs and jabs and undercuts and the different arts, devices, and stratagems by which they had accomplished. The general opinion was that catching a dragon napping was not as easy as it sounds. An attempt to stick it in or prod it in his sleep was more likely to end in disaster than a bold frontal attack. All while they talked, the thrush listened, till at least when the star, till at last, not least, till at last when the stars began to peep forth, it silently spread its wings and flew away. All while they talked and the shadow lengthened. Bilbo became more happy. Oh, became more and more unhappy, and his foreboding grew. At last, he interrupted them. I'm very sure we are unsafe here, he said. I don't see a point of sitting here. The dragon has withered all pleasant green. Anyway, the night has come and it's cold, but I feel in my bones that this place will be attacked again. Smog knows now how I came to his hall, so you can trust him to guess where the other end of the tunnel is. He will break all this side of the mountain to bits, if necessary, to stop our entrance. And if we smashed it with better, or smashed with it the better, he will like it. You are very gloomy, Mr. Baggins, said Thorin. Why has not Smog blocked the lower end, then, if he is eager to keep us out? He has not, or we should have heard him. I don't know. I don't know. Because at first he wanted to try to lure me in again. I suppose now perhaps he is waiting till after tonight's hunt. Or because he does not want to damage his bedroom if he can help it. But I wish he would not argue. Smog will be coming out at any minute now. And our only hope is to get well in the tunnel and shut the door. He seemed so much in earnest that the dwarves at last did as he said. Though they delayed shutting the door, it seemed a desperate plan. For no one knew how they could get it open again from the inside, and the thought of being shut in a place from which only one way out led through the dragon's lair was not the one they liked. Also, everything seemed quite quiet, both outside and down the tunnel. So, for a longish while, they sat inside, not far down from the half-open door, and went on talking. Talk turned to the dragon's wicked words about the dwarves. Bilbo wished he had never heard them, or at least that he could feel quite uncertain that the dwarves now were absolute honest when they declared that they had never thought at all what would happen if the treasure had been. We knew it was a desperate venture, said Thorin, and we knew still, and I still think that when we have won it, It will be a time enough to think about it. As for your share, Mr. Baggins, I assure you we are more than grateful, and you shall choose your own 14th. As soon as we have anything to divide. I'm sorry if you are worried about transport, and admit the difficulties are great. The lands have not become less wild with the passing of time. Rather, the reverse. But we will do whatever we can for you, and take our share from the costs when the time comes. Believe me or not, as you like. From the talk turned into great From that the talk turned to the great hoard itself, and to the things that Thorin and Balin remembered. They wondered if they were still lying there unharmed in the hall below. The spears that were made for armies of the great King Belathorin, monks instead. Each at the thrice forged head, and the shafts were inlaid with cunning gold, but they were never delivered or paid for. Shields made for warriors long dead. The great cup of Thor, two-handed, hammered, and carved with birds and flowers, whose eyes and petals were jewels coated of mail gilded and silvered and impenetrable. The necklace of Girion, Lord of Dale, and made of 500 emeralds green as grass, which for arming his he gave for the arming of his eldest son, and a coat of dwarven linked rings, the like of which had never been made before, for it was wrought of pure silver and the power and strength of triple steel. But fairest of all was the great white gem, which the dwarfs had found beneath the roots of the mountain, the heart of the mountain, the Arkstone of Thorn. The Arkstone for thorns in the dark, half dreaming with his chin up in his knees. It was like a globe with 1,000 facets. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon. But the enchanted desire of the horde had fallen from Bilbo. All through their talk, he was only half listening to them. He sat nearest to the door with one ear cocked for the beginnings of sound without. His other was alert to the echoes beyond the murmur of the dwarves, or any whisper of a movement from below. Darkness grew deeper, and he grew even more uneasy. Shut the door, he begged them. I fear that the dragon in my marrow. I like this silence far less than the uproar of last night. Shut the door before it was too late. Something in his voice gave the dwarves an uncomfortable feeling. Slowly, Thorin shook off his dreams, and getting up, he kicked away the stone that wedged the door. Then they thrust upon it and closed it with a snap and clang. No trace of a keyhole was left on the inside. They were shut in the mouth. And not a moment too soon. They had hardly gone any distance down the tunnel when a blow smote on the side of the mountain like a crash of battering rams made from the forest oaks swung by giants. The rock boomed and the walls cracked and the stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had been open? I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel and glad to be still alive. While behind them, outside, they heard the roar and rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and cliff with lashings of his huge tail, till their little lofty campground, the scorching grass, the thrush stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens. And an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in a silent stealth, quietly soared into the air, and then floated heavily and slow in the dark, like a monstrous crow, down the wind towards the west of the mountain. In the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and espying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. This was the outburst of his wrath, where he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. After he had let his rage in this way, he felt better, and thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meanwhile, he had further vengeance to take. Barrel, he snorted. Your feet come from the water side, and up from the water. You came without a doubt. I know your smell, but if you are not one of the men of the lake, you had their help. They shall see me and remember who is the real king. He rose in fire and went away south towards the running river. Let's double check pages real. Maybe we won't get through it. I don't know. I don't know. Well, let's see how far we can get. That's behind me now. Something I gotta get used to. That here. That there. There we go. Now my water is over here. And we... no. We'll do it. Actually, you know what? I'll just keep reading. Right, I got it. Real close. There we go. In the meanwhile, the dwarves sat in darkness. Another silence fell about them. Little they ate, and little they spoke. They could not count the passing of time, and they were scarcely dared to move. For the whisper of their voices echoed and rustled in the tunnel. If they dozed, they woke still in darkness and silence going on unbroken. At last, after days and days of waiting, as it seemed, and they became choked in days for want of air they could not bear no longer, they would almost have welcomed sounds from below the dragon's return. In the silence they feared some cunning delivery of his, but they could not sit there forever. Thorin spoke. Let us try the door, he said. I must feel the wind on the side of my face or I die. I think I would rather be smashed by smog in the opening and suffocate me here. So several of the dwarves got up and groped the back where the door had been, but they found the upper end of the tunnel had been shattered and blocked with broken rock. Neither key nor magic they had once obeyed would open the door ever again. How we are trapped, they groaned. This is the end. We shall die here. Somehow, just when the doors were almost despairing, Bilbo felt a strange lightening of the heart, as if a heavy weight had gone under his waistcoat. Come on. While there's still life and hope, as my father used to say, and third time pays for all. Oh, I'm going down the tunnel once again. I've been down that way twice. But I knew there was a dragon at the other end, so I'll risk a third visit when I am no longer sure. Anyway, the only way out is down, and I think that is time you better all come with me. In desperation, they all agreed, and Thorin was the first to go forward on Bilbo's side. Now, do be careful, whispered the hobbit. As quiet as you can be. I may need no smog at the bottom, but then again, there may be. Don't let us take any unnecessary risks. Down, down they went. The dwarves could not, of course, compare with the hobbit in real stealth, and they made a big deal of puffing and shuffling, which echoes magnified alarmingly. But though, even now and then and again, Bilbo and Fierce stopped and listened, and a sound stirred below. Near the bottom as well as he The judge, Bilbo, slipped on his ring and went ahead. But he did not need it. The darkness was complete, and they were all invisible. Ring or no ring. In fact, so black it was, the hobbit came to the opening unexpectedly, put his hand in the air, stumbled forward, and rolled headlong into the hall. There he lay face downwards on the floor, and did not dare get up, or even hardly breathe. Nothing moved. There was a gleam of light, unless, as it seemed to him, but at last he slowly raised his head, and there was a pale white glint above him, and far in the gloom, but certainly it was not a sparkle of dragonfire, though the warm stench was heavy in the place, and the taste of vapor was on his tongue. At length, Mr. Baggins could bear it no longer. "Confound you, Smog, you worm," he squeaked aloud. "Stop playing hide and seek, and give me a light, and then eat me if you can catch me." Faint echoes ran round the unseen hall, but there was no answer. Bilbo got up and found that he did not know what direction to turn in. "I wonder what on earth Smog is playing at," he said. "He is not at home today, or tonight, or whatever it is. I do believe if Orn and Gloin had not lost their tinder boxes, perhaps we can make a light and have a look around for luck turns." "Light!" he cried. "Anybody make a light?" The dwarves, of course, were alarmed when Bilbo fell forward with a step and bump into the hall, and they sat huddled just where he had left them at the end of the tunnel. "Shh," they hissed when they heard his voice, and thought that helped the hobbit to find out where they were. It was some time before he could get anywhere else out of them. But in the end, when Bilbo actually began to stomp on the floor and screamed out "light" at the top of his shrill voice, Thorin gave way, and Orn and Glorn were sent back to their bundles at the top of the tunnel. Amazing that they're able to do this without dark vision. After a while, a tinkling gleam showed up, returning, Glowing with a small pen torch alight in his hand, and glowing with a bundle of others under his arm. Quickly Bilbo trotted to the door and took the torch, but he could not persuade the dwarfs to light the others, or to come and join him yet. As Thorin had carefully explained, Mr. Baggins was still officially their expert burglar and investigator. If he liked to risk a light, that was his affair. They would wait in the tunnel for his report, so they sat near the door and watched. They saw the little dark shape of the hobbit start across the floor and head holding his tiny light afloat. Every now and again, while he was still near enough, they had caught a glint of the tinkle as he stumbled on some gold thing. The light grew smaller as he wandered away into the vast hall. He began to rise, dancing into the air. Bilbo was climbing the great amount of treasure. Soon he stood upon top and still went on. Then they saw him halt and stoop for a moment, but they did not know for the reason. It was the Arkstone, the heart of the mountain. So Bilbo guessed from Thorin's description. But indeed, there could have not been two gems, even so marvelous a hoard, even in all the world. Ever as he climbed, the same white gleam had shone before thin and drawn his feet towards it. Slowly it grew to a little globe and pallid light. Now as he came near, it was tinged with a flickering sparkle of many colors to its surface. Reflected and splintered from the waving light of his torch. At last he looked down on it and caught his breath. The great jewel shone before his feet of his own inner light, and yet, cut and fashioned by the dwarves, who had dug it from the heart of the mountain long ago. It took all light that fell upon it and changed it into 10,000 sparkles of white radiance, shot with glints of the rainbow. Suddenly Bilbo's arms went towards it, drawn by his enchantment. His small hand would not close about it, for it was a large and heavy gem, but he lifted it and shut his eyes and put it in his deepest pocket. Now I am a burglar indeed, he thought, but I suppose I must have told the dwarves about it for some time. They did say I could pick and choose my own share, and I think I would choose this, if they all took the rest. All the same, he had an uncomfortable feeling that the picking and choosing had not really been meant to include the marvelous gem, and that trouble would yet come of it. Now he went on again, down the other side of the great mound he climbed, and the spark of his torch vanished from the sight of the watching dwarves. But soon they saw it far away in the distance again. Bibble was crossing the floor of the hall. He went on until he came to the great doors on the further side, and there was a draught of air refreshed by him, but it almost puffed out his light. He peeped timidly through and caught a glimpse of the great passages of the dim and beginnings of wide stars, great gloom. There was no sight or sound of Smog. He was just going to turn back and go when a black shape swooped behind him and brushed his face. He squeaked and started and stumbled back and fell. His torch dropped head towards and went out. Only a bat, I suppose, and hope, he said miserably. But what now am I to do? Which is east, south, north, or west? Thorn, Balin, Orin, Gloin, Keely, he cried out as best he could. It seemed a thin little noise in the tunnel of blackness. The lights gone out. Something came and found me and help. For the moment, his courage had failed altogether. Faintly, the dwarves heard his small cries, though the only word they could catch was help. Oh wait, no, never mind. We can finish this. It's only 10 pages each. How on earth Arthur under it happened? Said Thorn. Certainly not the dragon, or he would not have gone squeaking. They waited a moment or two, and still there was no dragon noises, no sound at all. Oh, in fact, but Bilbo's voice. Come on, one of you! Get another light or two, Thorn ordered. It seems we have got to go and help our burglar. It is about our turn to help, said Balin. I am quite willing to go. Anyway, I expect it is safe at the moment. Gloin lit several more torches, and they all crept out one by one, went along the wall and as hurriedly as they could. It was not long before they met Bilbo himself, coming back towards them. His wits had quickly returned as soon as he saw the twinkle of their lights. Only a bat and a dropped torch, nothing worse, he said to their questions, though they were much relieved when they were inclined to be grumpy at being frightened for nothing. But what would they have said if he hadn't told them at the moment about the Arkstone? I don't know. They were fleeting glimpses of treasure which they had caught as they went along and rekindled all the fire of their dwarves' hearts. When the heart of a dwarf, even the most respectable, is awakened by golden jewels, he grows suddenly bold, and he may become. The dwarves indeed no longer needed urging. All now were eager to explore the hall where they had had the chance and willing to believe it that, for the present, Smog was away from home. Even now, gripped by a torch as they gazed first on one side and another, they forgot their fear and even caution. They spoke aloud and cried out to one another as they lifted old treasures from one mound or from wall and held them in the light and caressed and fingered them. Feely and Keely were almost in merry mound, finding still hanging there golden harps strung with silver. They took and struck them again, and magical, and also untouched by dragon, who had small interest in music. They were still in tune. The dark hall was filled with a melody that had been long silent. But most of the dwarves were more practical. They gathered gems and stuffed their pockets, and let what they could not carry fall back through their fingers with a sigh. Thorin was at least among them. but always he searched from side to side for something he could find. It was the Arkstone, but he spoke it of it yet to no one. Now the dwarfs took down mail and weapons from the walls and armed themselves. Royal indeed did Thorn look, clad in a coat of gold-plated rings of silver rings with a silver hafted axe and a belt crusted with scarlet stones. Mr. Baggins, he cried, here is the first payment of your reward. Cast off your old coat and put this on. With that, he put Bilbo a small coat of mail wrought for some young elf prince long ago. It was of silver steel, which elves called mithril, and with it a belt of pearls and crystals, a light helm, a figured leather, strengthened with beneath the hoops of steel, and studded about the brim with white gems, and was set upon Hobbit's head. I feel magnificent, he thought, but I rather absurd. How they would laugh on the hill at home. Still, I wish there was a looking glass handy. All the same, Mr. Baggins kept his head more clear of the bewitchment of the hoard than the dwarves did. Long before the dwarves were tired of examining the treasure, he became weary of it, sat on the floor. He began to wonder nervously at what end it will be. I would give a good many of these precious goblets, he thought, for a drink of something cheering out of one of Baron's wooden bowls. Thorin, he cried next. What next? We are armed. But what good was any armory ever before against Smaug the Dreadful? This treasure is not yet won. We are not looking for gold yet, but we are before we to escape. And we may have tempted fate too long, but luck too long. You speak truth, answered Thorin, recovering his wits. Let us go. I will guide you. Not in 1,000 years shall I forget the ways of the palace. Then he hailed the others and gathered them together. Holding their torches above their heads, they passed through the gate doors, not without many backward glance of their longing. Their glinting mail they had covering again, their old cloaks, with their old cloaks, and their bright helms with their tattered hoods. And one by one they walked behind Thorin, a line of little lights in the darkness that halted once, listening in fear once more for any rumors of the dragon coming. For all the old ornaments were loud mortals or destroyed, for all was befooled and blasted with their comings and goings of the monster. Thorin knew every passage and every turn. They climbed the stairs and turned and went down wide echoed ways, turned again and climbed yet more stairs and yet more stairs again. These were smooth and cut out of the living rock, broad and fair. Up and up the dwarves went. They met no sign of any living creature, only furtive shadow that fled from the approach of their torches, fluttering in the rocks. The steps were not made all the same for hobbit legs, and Bilbo was just feeling that he could go on no longer, when suddenly the roof sprang high and far above the reach of their torchlight. A white glimmer could be seen coming through the opening far above. The air smelt sweeter. Before them, light came dimly through the great doors that hung twisted on the hinges and half burnt. This is the great chamber of Thor, said Thorin. Hall of feasting and council, not far off from the front gate. They passed through the ruined chamber. Tables were rotting there. Chairs and benches were lying there, overturned, charred, and decayed. Skulls and bones were upon the floor among the flagons and bowls and broken drinking horns and dust. And they came through yet more doors at the further end, and the sound of water fell on their ears, and the gray light grew suddenly more full. There is the birth of the running river, said Thorin. There it hastens to the gate. Let us follow it. Out of the dark opening a wall of rock there issued a boiling water. It flowed swirling in a narrow channel, carved made straight and deep cunning of the ancient hands. Beside it It ran a stone-paved road, wide enough for many men abreast. Swiftly along this ran and around a wide sweeping turn, and behold, before them stood the broad light of day. In front there rose a tall arch, still showing the fragments of old cavern work within, worn and splintered and blackened though it was. A misty sun sent its pale light between the arms of the mountain, and beams of gold fell on pavement at the threshold. A wool of a whirl of bats, frightened from slumber by their smoking torches, flurried over them and sprang forward at their feet, slithering on snows and smooth and slime by the passion of the dragon. Now before them the water fell noisily outside, foamed down towards the valley. They flung their pale torches to the ground and stood out and gazed with their dazzled eyes. They were come to the front gate and were to look upon Dale. Well, said Bilbo, I never expected to be looking out this door, and I never expected to be so pleased to see the sun again, and to feel the wind on my face, but the wind is cold. It was. A bitter easterly breeze blew the threats of oncoming winter, and swirled round and round the arms of the mountain to the valley, and sighed among the rocks after a long time in the stewing depths of the dragon-haunted caverns. They shivered in the sun. Suddenly, Bilbo realized that he was not only tired, but also hungry indeed. It seems to be late morning, he said, and I suppose it is more or less breakfast time, if there is any breakfast to be had. But I don't feel that Smaug's front doorstep is the safest place for a meal. Dude, let's go somewhere where we can sit and quiet for a bit. Quite right, said Balin. And I think I know which way we should go. We got to make for the old lookout post at the southwest corner of the mountain. How far is that? 5 hours march, I should think. It'll be a rough going. The road from the gate along the left edge of the stream seems all broken up, but look down there. The river loops suddenly east towards Dale, in front of the ruined town. At that point, there was once a bridge leading to a steep stairs that climbed up to the bank, and so to a road running towards Ravenhill. This, or was, a path that left the road and climbed to the post. A hard climb, too, even if the old steps are still there. Dear me, grumbled the hobbit. More walking, more climbing without breakfast. I wonder how many breakfasts and other meals we have missed inside that nasty, clockless, timeless hole. As a matter of fact, 2 nights and a day between gone by, and not altogether without food, since the dragon smashed the magic door, but Bilbo had quite lost count. It might have been 1 night or a week. Think of nights, for all he could tell. Come, come, said Thorin, laughing. His spirits had begun to rise again, and he rattled the precious stones in his pockets. Don't call my place a nasty hole. You wait till it has been cleared and redecorated. That won't be till Smaug's dead, said Bilbo gloomily. In the meanwhile, where is he? I would have a good breaking fast to know. I hope he is not at the mountain looking down on us. That idea disturbed the dwarf mightily, and they quickly decided that Bilbo and Balin were right. We must move away from here, said Dory. I feel as if his eyes were on the back of my head. It is a cold, lonesome place, said Bumber. There may be drink, but I see no sign of food. The dragon could always be hungry in such parts. Come, come, said the others. Let's follow Balin's path. Under the rocky wall to the right there was no path, so they trudged among the stones to the left side of the river. The emptiness and desolation soon sobered even Thorin again. The bridge that Balin had spoken of had found long fallen, and most of its stones were now only boulders in the shallow, noisy stream. But they forded the water without much difficulty, and found the ancient steps, and climbed the highest bank. After going a short way, they struck the old road, and before long came to a deep dell sheltered among the rocks. There they rested for a while, and had had such a breakfast as they could, chiefly cream and water. If you know what cream is, I can only say that I do not know the recipe, but it is biscuitish. Keeps good indefinitely, and is supposed to be sustaining, and is certainly not entertaining, being in fact very uninteresting except a chewing exercise. It was made by the lakemen for long journeys. After that they went on again, and now the road struck westward and left the river. The great shoulder of the south pointing mountain spur drew nearer. At length they reached the hill path. It scrambled steeply, and they plodded slowly behind one another, till at last, in the late afternoon, they had come down on the ridge and saw the wintry sun and began towards to the west. Not a lot, going downwards toward the west. Here they found a flat place, without a wall on three sides, but backed by the north by a rocky face in which there was an opening like a door. From that door there was a wide view east and south and west. Here, said Bellin, in the old days we would always keep watchmen, and that door behind leads into the rocky chamber that was made as a guard room. There are several places like that around the mountain. But here, where there seemed small need for watching in those days for our prosperity, and the guards were made over comfortable, and perhaps otherwise you might have longer warnings of the coming of the dragon, and things might have been different. Still, here we can lie, hidden, sheltered for a while, and can see much without being seen. Not much use if we have been seen coming here, said Dory, who was always looking behind, up towards the mountain's peak, as he expected to see Smog perched there like a bird on a steeple. We must take our chances of that, said Thorn. We can go no further today. Here, here, said Pilbo, and flung himself to the ground. In the rock chamber, there would have been room for 100, and there was still a small chamber further in, and removed from the cold inside. It was quite deserted. Not even wild animals seemed to have used it all these days of Smog's dominion. There they laid their burdens, and some drew themselves down at once and slept, but others sat near the outer door and discussed their plans. In their small talk, they came perpetually back to one thing. Where was Smog? They looked west, and there was nothing. East was nothing. And south there was no sign of the dragon. But there was gathering of many birds, and at that they gazed and wondered, but they were nearer understanding it when the first cold stars came out. Chapter 14. Fire and Water. Now, if you wish, like dwarfs, to hear the news of Smog, you must go back again to the evening when he smashed the door and flew in rage 2 days before. Again, I want to finish it tonight, but I want to double check to be sure. 10 pages, 14, 10 pages, 10 pages, 7, 11, and then how many to the end? Okay, we can do this. Let me not knock my microphone. Let's try this again. All right. Men of the lake town and Azagorath were mostly indoors, for the breeze was from the black east and chill, but a few were walking ways and watching as they were fond of doing. The stars shone out from the smooth patches of the lake as they opened the sky. From their town, the lonely mountain was mostly seen by the low hills at the far end of the lake, though a gap in which running river came from the north. Only its high peak could they see in its clear weather, and they looked sulkily at it, for it was an anonymous river, and drew even in the light in the morning. Now it was lost and gone and bloated and dark. Suddenly, it flickered back into view. A brief glow touched and faded. Look, said one. The lights again. Last night the watchman said that saw them start and fade from the midnight till dawn. Something is happening up there. Perhaps the king under the mountain is forging gold, said another. It is long since he went north. It is time the songs began to prove themselves again. What king? Which king? Said another with grim voice. As like as not, it is not the marauding fire of the dragon, the only king in the mountain we've ever known. We're always foreboding gloomy things, said others. Anything from floods to poisoned fish. Think of something cheerful. Then suddenly, a great light appeared in a low place in the hills on the northern end of the great lake turned golden. The king beneath the mountain, they shouted. His wealth is like the sun, his silver like a fountain. His river's golden run, the river is running gold from the mountain, they cried. And everywhere their windows were opening and feet were hurried. There was once more a tremendous excitement and enthusiasm, but the grim-voiced fellow ran a hoof foot to the master. The dragon is coming, or am I a fool? He cried. Cut the bridges. To arms, to arms! Then warning trumpets were suddenly sounded, and echoes along the rocky shores. The cheering stopped, and the joy was turned to dread. So it was the dragon did not find them quite unprepared. Before long, so great was his speed that they could see a spark of fire rushing towards them, and growing ever hunger and more bright, and not the most foolish doubted that the prophecies had gone rather wrong. Still, they had little time. Every vessel in the town was filled with water, every warrior was armed, every arrow and dart was ready, and the bridge to the land was thrown down and destroyed. Before the roar of Smark's terrible approach grew loud, and the lake rippled red as fire beneath the awful beating of his wings. Amid shrieks and wailing and shouts of men, and he came before them, swept towards the bridges, and was foiled. The bridge was gone, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vapor of steam would arise, enough to cover all land with a mist for days. But the lake was mightier than he. It would quench him before he could pass through. Roaring as he swept back over the town, a hail of dark arrows leapt up and snapped and rattled on his scales and jewels. The shafts fell back, kindling up by his breath and burning and hissing into the lake. No fireworks you ever imagined equal to the sight of that night. As the twanging of bows and thrilling of the trumpets of the dragon's wrath blazed to heights till he was blind and mad with it. No one dared to give battle to him for many an age, nor would they have dared now, if it had not been for the grim-voiced man. Bard was his name, who ran to and fro, cheering on the archers and urging the master to order them to fight to the last arrow. Fire leaped from the dragon's jaws. He circled for a while in the air above them, lighting all the lake. The trees by the shores shone like copper and like blood, with leaping shadows and dense black at their. Then down he swooped straight through the arrow storm, reckless in his rage, taking no heed to his turning scarily sides towards his foes, seeking only to set their town ablaze. Fire leaped from their thatched roofs and wooden beamed ends as he hurtled down and passed round again. All had been drenched with water before he came. Once more water was flung by 100 hands wherever a spark appeared. Back swirled the dragon. A sweep of his tail, and the roof of the great house crumbled and smashed down. Flames unquenchable sprang high into the night, another swooping with another and another house, and then another sprang afire and fell. And still no arrow hindered Smog, or hit him more than a fly from the marshes. Already men were jumping into the water on every side. Women and children were being huddled into laden boats into the market pool. Weapons were flung down. There is mourning and weeping. For but a little ago the old songs of the mirth had come and sang about the dwarves. Now men cursing their names. The master himself was turning into his great gilded boat, hoping to row away in the confusion and save himself. Soon all the town would be deserted and burned down to the surface of the lake. That was the dragon's hope. They could all not get into the boats for all they could all get in the boats for all he cared, though he could not have fine sport there. He'd have fine sport hunting them, or they could stop till they starved. Let them try to get to land, and he would be ready. Soon he would set all all the shore and the woods ablaze, wither every field and pasture. Just now he was enjoying the sport of the town baiting more than he enjoyed anything for years. But there was still a company of archers that held their ground among the burning houses. Their captain was Bard, voiced and grim-faced, whose friends had cursed him, prophesying floods and poisoned fish, though they knew his worth and courage. He was a descendant of the long line of Kieran, Lord of Dale, whose wife and children had long escaped down the running river from ruin long ago. Now he shot with a great year bow till all his arrows were spent. The flames were near him, his companions were leaving him. He bent his bow for the last time. Suddenly, out of the dark, something fluttered to his shoulder. He startled, but it was an old thrush. Unafraid, it perched by his ear and brought him news. Marveling, he found out he could understand its tongue, for he was a race of Dale. Wait, it said to him. The moon is rising. Look there, with a hollow on the left side breast as he flies, and turns above you. While Bard paused in wonder, it took hold of him. Paused in wonder, and wonder, it told him of tidings of the mountains and all that was heard. Then Bard drew his bowstring into his ear. The dragon was circling back, flying low as he came, and the moon rose above the eastern shore and slivered his great wings. Arrow, said the bowman, Black Arrow, I have saved you for last. You have never failed me, and always I have recovered you. I had you from my father, and he from old. If you come down from the forges of the true king of the mountain now, go now and speed well. The dragon swooped once more, lower than ever, as he turned and then dived down. Belly glittered white with sparkling fires, gems in the moon, but not in one place. The great bow twanged, but the black arrow sped straight from the string, straight from the hollow, but by the left breast where the foreling was flung wide. In it smote and vanished barb, shaft and feather, so fierce as was its flight. With a shriek that defeated men, felled trees, and split stone, Smoke shot, spouting into the air, turning over and crashed down from the high and roof. Full on the town he fell. His blast arrows spittered in sparks and lids. The lake roared in. A vast steam leaped up and leapt up, white and sudden in the sudden dark under the moon. There was a hiss, a gushing whirl, and then silence. That was the end of Smog and Esgroth. Not of Bard. The waxing moon was higher and higher, and the wind grew loud and cold. Twisted the white fog, bending to pillars and hurrying clouds, and it drove to the west and as to scatter in shreds as over marshes before Mirkwood. There were the many boats that could have been dotted on the black of the surface of the lake, and down the wind came to the voices of the people of Esgoth, lamenting the lost town in goods and houses. But they had really much to be thankful for, and I thought of it, though it could hardly be expected that they could just them. 3/4 of the town had at least escaped alive. Their woods and fields and pastures and cattle and most of their boats remained undamaged, and the dragon was dead. What that meant, they had not realized. They gathered in mournful crowds upon the western shores, shivered in the cold wind, in their first The first complaints and anger against the master who had left the town so soon, while some were willing to defend it. He may have a good head for business, especially his own business, some murmured. He is no good when anything serious happening. They praised the courage of Bard in his last mighty shot. If only he had not been killed, they all said. We would make him king, Bard, the dragon shooter, in the line of Girion. Alas, he is lost. In the very midst of their talk, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. He was drenched with water, his black hair hung wet over his face and shoulders, and fierce light was in his eye. Bard is not lost, he cried. He died from Ezroth, where the enemy was slain, and I am Bard, line of Girion, and the slayer of dragons. King Bard, they shouted, but the master ground his chattering teeth. Droin was Lord of Dale, not King of Ezroth, he said. In Lake Town, we have always elected masters from line and wise, and have not endured the rule of mere mighty men. Let King Bard go back to his own kingdom, Dale. He's now free by his valor, and nothing hinders. And that any that wish to go with him, if they prefer the cold shores and the shadow of the mountain to the green shores of the lake, the wise will stay here and hope to rebuild our town and enjoy again in its time of peace and riches. We will have King Bard, said the people near at hand. The people near at hand shouted in reply. We've had enough of the old men and money counters, and people further off took their bags and cried, up the bowmen and down the money bags, till the clamor echoed among. I am the last man to underveil Bard the bold man, said Master Weirdly, for Bard now still close to Sideman. He has tonight earned an eminent place in the role of the benefactors of our town. He is worthy of many imperishable songs, but why, O people? And here the master rose to his feet and spoke very loud and clear. Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be disposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, I might ask? Who obtained of us rich gifts and appeal help, and led us to believe that old songs could come true? Who played on our soft hearts and pleasant fancies? What sort of gold have they sent down to the river to reward us? Dragonfire and ruin? From whom should we claim and recompose of our damage and aid for our widows and orphans? As you see, the master had not got his position for nothing. The result of his words was more the amount of people quite forget the idea of a king. The result of his words was that for the moment the people quite forgot their idea of a new king, and turned their angry thoughts towards Thorin and company. Wild and bitter words were shouted from the many sides. Some of those who before sung the old songs loudest were now heard as loudly crying. The dwarves had stirred the dragon and up again against them deliberately. Fools, said Bard, why waste words and wrath on those unhappy creatures? Doubtless they perished first in fire before Smaug came to us. Then, even as he was speaking, the thought that came into his heart and fabled treasure of the mountain lying without guard or owner. He suddenly fell silent. He thought of the master's words, and of Dale rebuilt, filled with golden bells, if he could, but find the men. At length he spoke. There is no time for anger words, master, or for considering the weighty plans of change. There is much work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words and go north with any that will follow me. Then he strode off to help in the ordering of the camps and in the care of the sick and the wounded. But the master scowled at his back as he went, and remained sitting on the ground. He thought much but said little, unless it was call loudly for men to bring him fire and wood. Now everywhere Bard went, he found talking and running like fire around people concerning the vast treasure that was now unguarded. Men spoke of the recompense for all their harm that would soon get from it, and wealth over, and to spare with which to buy rich things from the south. It cheered them greatly in their plight. That was well for the night, and was bitter and miserable. Shelters could be contributed for a few, and the master had one, and there was still a little food, even the master went short. And fuck this master. Then he took ill of wet and cold and sorrow that night, and afterwards died, who had escaped uninjured from the ruin of the town. In the days that followed, there was much sickness and great hunger. Meanwhile, Bard took the lead and ordered things as he wished, though always in the master's name. He had a hard task to govern the people and direct preparations for their protection and housing. Probably most of them would have perished in the winter that now hurried after autumn. If help had not been hand, but help came swiftly, for Bard at once had speedy messengers sent up the river to the forest and asked the aid of King of the Elves of the Wood. And these messengers had found a host already on the move, although it was not only a third day. Though it was then only a third day, fall of smog. The Elven King had received news from his messengers and from birds that loved his folk had already knew much of what happened. Very great indeed was the commotion among all things when wings that had dealt the borders of the desolation of the dragon. The air was filled with circling flocks, and their swift flying messengers flew here and there across the sky. Above the borders of the forest there was whistling, crying, and piping. Far over Mirkwood tidings spread. Smog is dead. Leaves rustled. Startled ears were lifted. Even before the Elf King rode forth, the news had passed west, right into the pine woods of the Misty Mountains. Borin had heard it in his own wooden house, and the goblins were at council in their own caves. That will be the last thing we shall hear of Thor and Oakshield, I fear, said the king. He would have done far better to remain my guest. It is an ill wind all the same. That blows no one any good. He, too, had not forgotten the legend of the wealth of Thor. So it was that Bard's message found him, now marching, many spearmen and bowmen, and crows were gathered thick above him, with their thought of that war was awakened again, such as had not been in those parts for a long age. But the king, when he received the prayers of Bard, had pity, for he was the lord of a good and kindly people. So turning his march, which had been direct towards the mountain, he hastened now down towards the river to the long lake. He had not boats or rafts, though he enough for his host, and they were forced to go slower away by foot. But great store of goods he sent them and had by water. Still, elves were light-footed, and there were not in these days much used to these marches, and the treacherous lands between forgotten shores and the lake. Their going was swift. Only 5 days after the death of the dragon, they came upon the shores and looked upon the ruins of the town. Their welcome was good as may be expected, and the men and their masters were ready to make any bargain for the future in return for the Elf King's aid. Their plans were soon made. With the women and children, the old and the unfit, the master remained behind, with him some men of crafts and many skilled elves, and they busied themselves felling trees and collecting timber sent down from the forest. Then they set about raising many busts by the shore or against the oncoming winter. Also, under the master's direction, they began planning of a new town designed more fair and larger than before, but not in the same place. They moved northward higher up the shore, forever after they had dread of water where the dragon lay. He would never again return to his golden bed, but was stretched cold as stone, twisted among the floor of the shallows. There for ages his huge bones could be seen in the clam of weather amid the ruined piles of an old town. A few dared to cross the cursed spot, and none dared to dive into the shivering water or recover precious stones that fell from his rotted carcass. But all the men of arms were still able, and most of the Elven King's array got ready to march north to the mountain. It was thus that in the Elven days, from the ruin of the town, the head of the host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake, and it came to the Desolation Lands. All right. Oh, we're almost there, guys. Oh, 19 chapter. It's not that. We are so close. We're so close. So close. Oh, I don't know if I can finish this in an hour. I think that's going to be the main thing. Can I do that in an hour? Can I do that? I also can't wait to continuously figure out the right appropriate settings for this stuff. I am using a new program for my PNG, so that's why I'm still kind of concerned about microphone levels, but we'll go from there. All right. Let's get through this. There are 7. Oh, we can do this. We can do this. Because there's 7, that's like 7. That's 44. That's 44 pages. We can do it. Let's do it. Now then, we returned to Bilbo and the dwarves. All night one of them had watched, but when the morning had come, they had not heard or seen any danger. But ever more thickly the birds were gathering. Their companies came flying in the south, and their crows still lived on the mountain and were reeling and crying unceasingly above. Something strange is happening, said Thorm. Time has gone from the autumn winter wanderings, and there are these birds that dwell always in the land. There are starlings and flocks of finches, and far off there are many cairn birds, as if battle were afoot. Suddenly, Bilbo pointed out, "There's that old thrush again," he cried. "It seemed to have escaped when Smaug smashed the mountainside, but I don't suppose the snails have." Sure enough, the old thrush was there, as Bilbo pointed out. He flew towards and perched on a stone nearby, and fluttered its wings and sang, then cocked his head to one side as if to listen, and then again he sang again, and then he listened. "I believe he's trying to tell us something," said Balaam, "but I can't follow the speech of such birds. It is very quick and difficult. Can you make it out, Mr. Baggins?" Very well," said Bilbo. "As a matter of fact, he could make nothing out at all. But the old fellow seems excited." "I wish he was a raven," said Balin. "I thought you did not like them. You seem very shy of them." When he came by this word, those were crows. And those are nasty, suspicious creatures. That's rude as well. You must have heard the ugly names they were calling after us. But ravens are different. They were used to be great friendship between them and the people of Thor. They often brought us secret news and were rewarded with such bright things that they coveted to hide in their dwellings. They live many a year, and their memories are long, and they hand wisdom on their own. They hand their own wisdom to their children. I know many among the ravens of the rocks when I was a dwarfen lad. This was very height was once named Raven Hill because there's a wise and famous pair, old Clark and his wife, that lived there. That lived here above the guard chamber. I don't suppose that any of the ancient speaking breed linger here now. No sooner than they finished speaking, That the old thrush gave a loud cry and immediately flew away. We may not understand him, but the old bird understands us, I'm sure. Keep watch now and see what happens. Before long, there was fluttering of wings, and came back the thrush, and with him the most decrepit old bird. He was getting blind, and he can hardly fly, and the top of his head was bald. He was an aged raven of great size. He was slightly. He was. He laid stiffly to the ground before them and slowly flapped his wings. O Thorin, son of Thorin, and Balin, son of Fúdin, he croaked. Balin could, and Bilbo could understand what he said, for he used ordinary language and not bird speech. Ah, yes. When all else fails, hobbit. I am Rock, son of Kark. Kark is dead, but he is well known to you once. It is 100 years and 350 since I came out of the egg, but I do not forget what my father told me. Now I am chief of the great ravens of the mountain. We are few, but we still remember the king that was of old. Most of the people are abroad, for there are great tidings in the south, some tidings of joy to you, and some you will not think so good. Behold, the birds are gathering back again to the mountain and to Dale from the south and east and west, for word has gone out that Smog is dead. Dead? Dead, shouted the dwarfs. Dead, then have been needlessly we've been needlessly in fear, and the treasure is ours. Ours, they sprang up and began to caper about for joy. Yes, dead, said Rourke. The thrush may his feathers never fall, saw him die. We trust his words. He saw him fall in the battle with the men of Ezagorath the third night. Back from now, at the rising of the moon. It was some time before Thorin could bring the dwarfs to be silent and listen to the raven's news. At length, when he was told of the tale of the battle, he went on. So much for joy, Thorin Oakshield. You may go back to your halls in safety. All the treasure is yours for the moment. But many are gathering hither up beside the birds. News of the death of the Guardian has already gone far and wide, and the legend of the wealth of Thor has not lost it in its telling during many years. Many are eager for a share spoil. Already a host of elves is on the way, and a caravan of birds are with them, hoping for battle and slaughter. By the lake men murmur that their sorrows are due to the dwarves. They are homeless and many have died. Smog has destroyed their town. I too think to find amends from your treasure, whether you are alive or dead. Your own wisdom may decide your course, but 13 is a small remnant for the great folk of Durin that once dwelt here, and are scattered far. If you will listen to my counsel, you will not trust the master of the lakemen, but rather him that shot down the dragon with his bow. Bard he is, of the race of Dale and the line of Girib. He is a grim but true. We could see peace once more among dwarves and men and elves along the long desolation, but he may cost you a great deal of gold, I have spoken. Oh, a great deal of gold, I have spoken. Then Thorin burst forth in anger. Oh, thanks, Rourke-Harksong. You and your people shall not be forgotten, but none of our gold shall thieves take or the violent carry off while we are alive. If you would earn our thanks, I make still more. Bring us news of any that draw near. Also, I beg you, if any of you are still young and strong of wing, saying that you would send messengers to our king in the mountains of the north, both west and east of here, and tell them of our plight. But go specifically to my cousin Dwayne in the Iron Mountains. He has many people well armed and dwells nearest to the place here. Bid him hasten. I will not say if this counsel be good or bad, croaked Rourke, but I will do what I can be done. And off he slowly flew. Back to the mountain, said Thord. We have little time to lose. Little food to use, cried Bilbo, always practical on such points. In any case, he felt the adventure was properly speaking over and dealt with the dragon, in which she was such mistaken. He would have given him most of his share of the profits for peaceful winding of the mountains. Back to the mountains, cried the dwarves, as if they had not heard him. So back he had to go with them. As you've heard some of the events already, you'll see that the dwarves still had some days before them. They explored the cabins once more and found that they expected not only the front gate remained open, all other gates, except of course the small secret door, had long ago been broken and blocked by smog, and no other sign of them remained. So now they begin to labor hard in fortifying the main entrance and remaking the road that led it from it. Tools were found in plenty that the miners and quarriers and builders of old had used, and such work the dwarves were blah, and at such work the dwarves were still very skilled. As they worked, the ravens brought them inconsistent tidings in ways they learned the Elven King turned aside the lake, and they still had a breathing space. But still, they heard that three of their ponies had escaped and were wandering far down the banks of the running river, not far from the rest of their stores had been left. So while the others went on with their work, Feely and Keely were sent guided by a raven to find their ponies and bring back all that they could. They were gone. They were 4 days gone, and by that time they knew that the joint armies of the Lakemen and Elves were hurried towards the mountains. But now their posts were higher for they had food for some weeks with care. Chiefly cram, of course, and they were very tired of it, but cram is much better than nothing. And already the gate was blocked with a wall of squared stones laid dry, but very thick and across the opening. There were holes in the wall which they could see or shoot, but no entrance. They climbed in and out with ladders and huddled stuff with ropes. For the issuing of the stream they had contrived into a small little arc under a new wall. A small arc under the new wall, but near the entrance they had, and so altered the narrow bed that a wide pool stretched from the mountain wall to the head of the fall over which the stream went towards. Still, approaching to the gate was now only possible without swimming along a narrow ledge of the cliff. To the right, as one looked outwards from the wall, the ponies they had brought only to the head of the steps above the old bridge and unloaded them with them there, had bidden them return to their masters, and sent them back riderless to the south. There came a night when suddenly there were so many lights as of fires and torches away south and dale before them. They have come, said Balaam, and their camp is very great. They must have come into the valley under the cover of dusk along the banks of the river. That night the dwarfs slept little. The morning was still pale when they saw a company approaching. From behind their wall they watched them come up to the valley's head and climb slowly. For long they could see both men of the lake, as if it were war, and elvish bowmen were among them. At length the foremost of these climbed the tumbled rocks and appeared at the top of the falls. And at the very great was the surprise to see the pool before them, and the gate blocked with a wall of new hewn stone. As they stood and pointed and spoke into one another, Thorin hailed them. Who are you? He called in a very loud voice. That comes as if in war to the gates of Thorin, son of Thorin, king under the mountain, and what do you desire? But they answered nothing. Soon turned swiftly back, and others, after gazing for a while at the gate and its defenses, soon followed them. That day the camp was moved and was brought to right between the arms of the mountain. The rocks echoed and the voices with the songs, as they had not done for many a day. There was sound, too, of elven harps, of sweet music, and as it echoed up towards them, it seemed that the chill of the air was warmed, and they had caught faintly the fragrance of woodland flowers blossoming in spring. Then Bilbo longed to escape from the dark fortress, and go down and join the mirth and feasting at the fires. Some of the younger dwarfs were moved in their hearts too, and they muttered that they wished things had fallen out otherwise, and that they welcomed such folk as friends, but Thorin scowled. Then the dwarves found themselves forth harps and instruments and regained from their hoard. Or their harps, instruments regained from their hoard. They made music to soften his mood, but their songs was not an elvish song, and much was the song they had sung long before Bilbo's little hobbit hole. Under the mountain, dark and tall, the king has come to his hall. His foe is dead, the worm of dread. And ever so his foe so fell. The sword is sharp and the spear is long. The arrow is swift, the gate is strong. The heart is bold that looks on gold. The dwarves no more shall suffer wrong. The dwarves of yore made its mighty spells, while yammering fell like ringing bells. In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the falls of the bells. On silver necklaces they strung, on the light star on the crown they hung, the dragon fire from twisted wire, the melody of harps they rung. The mountain throne once more is freed. O wandering folk, the summons heed. Come haste across the waste. The king of fret and king has need. Now we call over the mountains cold, come back to the caverns old. Here at the gates the king awaits, his hands are rich with gems and gold. The king has come into his hall, under the mountain dark and tall. The worm of dread is slain and dead, never so our foe shall fall. The song appeared to please Thorin, and he smiled and grew merry, and began reckoning the distance to the Iron Hills and how long it would be before Dwayne could reach the lonely mountain. If he had not set out his own message, if he had not set out as soon as the message reached him, but Bilbo's heart fell. Both the song and talk, they sound too much like warlike. The next morning early, a company of spearmen was seen crossing the river and marching up the valley. They bore with them a green banner of the Elven King and the blue banner of the lake. They advanced until they stood right before the wall of the gate. Again, Thorin hailed them with a loud voice. Who are you that you come armed for war at the gates of Thorin, son of Thorin, king under the mountain? This time he was answered. A tall man stepped forward, dark of hair and grim of face. He cried, Hail, Thorin! Why do you fence yourself like a robber in his hold? We are not yet foes, and we rejoice that you are alive beyond your hope. We came expecting to find nothing living here, yet now that we are meat, there is matter for parley and counsel. Who are you, and what have you of parley? I am Bard, and by my hand was the dragon slain, and your treasure delivered. Is that not a matter that concerns you? Moreover, I am by right the descendant of heir of Giorin of Dale, and in your hoard has been much of the wealth of his halls and town, which old Smaug stole. Is it not that a matter which we speak? Further, in his last battle, Smaug destroyed the dwellings of the men of Ezergoth, and I am yet the servant of their master. I would speak for him and ask whether you have no thought for the sorrow and misery of his people. They aided you in your distress, and hence you have thus brought the ruin only through doubtless undesigned. Now, these were fair words and true, if proudly and grimly spoken, and Bilbo thought that Thorin would at once admit what justice would send them. He did not, of course, except that anyone would remember that it was he who had discovered all by himself the dragon's weak spot, and that it was just as well, for no one ever did. Also, he did not reckon with the power that the gold has upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. Long hours in the past days Thorin had spent in the treasury, and the lust of it was heavy on him. Yet he had an eye for another adventure, another wonderful thing that was lying there, about which was wound old memories of the labors and sorrows of his race. You put your worst case last and in the chief place, Thorin answered. The treasure of my people no man has claimed, because Smog, who stole it from us, also robbed him of life in our home. The treasure was not his evil deeds. It should be amended with a share of it. The price of the goods and the assistance that we received in Lakeman and will fail to pay in due time. But nothing we will give, not even a loaf's worth. Under the threat of force. While armed host lies before our doors, we look on you like foes and thieves. It is my mind to ask what share of your inheritance you would have paid to our kindred, and had you found the hoard unguarded and us slain. A question, a just question, replied Bard. But you are not dead, and we were not robbers. Moreover, the wealthy may have pity beyond the right and the needy that befriended them when they were in want. And still my other claims remain unanswered. I will not parley, as I have said, with our men at my gate, nor at all with the people of the Elven King, whom I remember with small kindness. In this debate they have no place. Begone, now ere our arrows fly. And if you would speak with me again, first dismiss the elvish host to the woods where it belongs, and then return, lying in your arms before you approach the threshold. The Elven King is my friend, and he has secured the people of the lake in their need. Though they had no claim but friendship on him, answered Bard. We will give you time to repent your words, gather your wisdom ere we return. Then he departed and went back to the camp. Ere many hours were passed, the banner bearers returned, and the trumpets stood forth with a blast. In the name of Ezroth in the forest, one cried, we speak unto Thorin and Thorin's son Oakenshield, calling himself the king of the mountain, and we bid him consider well the claims that have been urged or be declared our foe. At the least, he shall deliver 1/12 portion of the treasure unto Bard as the dragon slayer, and as the heir of Ghirin. From that portion, Bard will himself contribute to the aid of Ezrogoth. But if Thorin would give the French, would have Thorin would have the friendship and the honor of the lands about, as his sirs had of old, then he will also give some of his own for his comfort of the land of the lake. Then Thor seized a bow of horn and shot an arrow at the speaker. It smote his shield, smote his shield and struck in the quiver. Since such is your answer, he called in return, I declare the mountain besieged. You shall not depart from it until you call on your side for a truce and parley. We will bear no weapons against you, but we will leave you to your gold. You may eat that if you will. With that, the messenger departed swiftly, and the dwarves were left to consider their case. So grim had Thorin become that even if they wished, the others would not dare to find fault with him. But indeed, most of them seemed to share his mind, except, of course, old fat Bumber and Feely and Keely. Bilbo, of course, disapproved of the whole turn of affairs. He had by now more than enough of the mountain, and had besieged inside. It was not at all to his taste. The whole place stinks of dragon, he grumbled to himself, and it makes me sick, and cram is beginning to stick to my throat. Oh, now we've made it to chapter 16. I'm so close. We're close. We're so close, guys. Oh. Why are my alerts off? That would have been bad. I'm glad I noticed that now and not later. Because that would have been bad if I gotten rated. See it. Alright. Chapter 16. A Thief in the Night. Now the days passed slowly and wearily. Many of the dwarves spent their time pilling and ordering treasure. And now Thorin spoke the Arkstone throne Waited him eagerly to look for it in every corner. The Arkstone of my father, he said, is worth more than a river of gold itself. To me, is beyond the price. Is beyond price. The stone of all the treasure I name unto myself, and I will be avenged on anyone who finds it and withholds it. Bilbo heard these words and grew afraid, wondering what would happen if the stone was found wrapped in an old bundle of tattered ornaments that he used as a pillow. All the same, he did not speak of it, for the weariness of the days grew heavier, and the beginnings of a plan had come into his little head. Things had gone on like this for some time when the ravens brought news of Dwayne and more than 500 dwarves hurrying from the Iron Mountains. We're now within 2 days' march of Dale coming from the northeast. But they cannot reach the mountains in March, said Rourke, and I fear least they will be a battle in the valley. I do not call this council good, though they are grim folk. They are not likely to overcome the host that beseeches you, even if they did so. What will you gain? Winter and snow is hastening behind them. How shall you feed with the friendship and the goodwill of the lands about you? The treasure is likely to be your death, though the dragon is no more. But Thorn was not moved. Winter and snow will bite both men and elves, and they may find their dwelling in the ways grievous to bear. With my friends behind them and winter upon them, they will perhaps be in softer mood to parley with. That night, Bilbo made up his mind. The sky was black and moonless, and as soon as it was full dark, he went into a corner of the inner chamber, just within the gate, drew up a bundle of rope, also with the Arkstone wrapped in a rag. He climbed to the top of the wall. Only Bumber was there, for it was his turn to watch, and the dwarves only kept one watchman at a time. It is mighty cold, said Bumber. I wish we had a fire up here, as they have in the camp. It is warm enough inside, said Bilbo. I dare say, but I am bound here till midnight, grumbled the fat dwarf. Sorry business altogether. Not that I venture to disagree with Thorin, may his beard grow ever longer. Yet, he was ever a dwarf with a stiff neck. Not as stiff as my legs, said Bilbo. I am tired of the stairs and stone passages. I give a good deal for the feel of grass at my toes. I can't give you those while the siege is going on, but it is long since I watched, and will take your turn for you if you like. There is no sleep in me. You're a good fellow. Oh yeah, that was this is why I need to figure out voices for characters before I do this kind of thing. I probably also need to speak a little closer to the microphone so that way I can catch that my lips can move. Something I will be working on and figuring out as the weeks progress. This is still a new program. Sir Baggins. Kindly, if there's anything should be a note, rouse me first, mind you. I will lay in the inner chamber on the left, not far away. Off you go, said Bilbo. I will wake you at midnight, and you can wake the next watchman. As soon as Bumber was gone, Bilbo put on his ring, fastened his rope, slipped down the wall, and was gone. He had about 5 hours before him, and Bumber would sleep. He could sleep at any time. And ever since the adventure in the forest, he was still trying to recapture the beautiful dreams he had then. And all the others were busy with Thorin. It was unlikely that any, or even Feely and Keely would come out on the wall until it was their turn. It was very dark, and the road, after a while, when he left the newly made path, climbed down towards the lower course of the stream. It was strange to him. At last, he had come to the bend where here he had crossed the river if he was to make for the camp as he wished. The bed of the stream was there shallow but already broad and foreboding dark. Foreboding it in the dark was not easy for the little hobbit. He was nearly across when he missed his footing on a round stone and fell into the cold water with a splash. He had barely scrambling out of the bank, shivering and sputtering, when up came elves in the gloom with bright lanterns in search for the cause of the noise. That was no fish, one said. There's a spy about. Hide your lights. they will help him more than us. If it's that little clear little creature that I said to be their servant. Servant indeed, snouted Bilbo. In the middle of his snort, he sneezed loudly, and the elves immediately gathered down. Let's have a light. He said, I'm here if you want me. He slipped the ring off and popped out from behind the rock. They seized him quickly, in spite of their surprise. Who are you? Are you with the dwarves, hobbits? What are you doing? And how did you get past our sentinels? They asked one another. I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins, he answered, companion of Thorin, if you want to know. I know your king well by sight, though perhaps he doesn't know me to look at. But Bard will remember me. It is Bard I particularly want to see. Indeed, and what be your business? Whatever it is my own, my good elves. But if you wish to ever get back to your own woods, this cheery place, he answered, then you will take me along to a quick fire where I can dry, and then you will let me speak to your chiefs as quickly as they may be. I have only an hour or two to spare. That is how it came about that some 2 hours after his escape from the gate, Bilbo was sitting beside a warm fire in a large tent. And there too sat, gazing curiously at him, both the Elven King and Bard. A hobbit in elvish armor, partly wrapped in an old blanket, was something new to them. Really, you know, said Bilbo, in his best business manner, things are impossible. Personally, I am tired of the whole affair. I wish to go back to the west to my own home, where the folks were more reasonable. But I have interest in the matter, 1/14th share to be precise, according to a letter which, fortunately, I believe I have kept. He drew out from the pocket in his own jacket, which he so wore even in his mail. Crumpled and much folded, Thorin's letter had been put under the cloak on his mantelpiece in May. Share in the profits, mind you, he went on. I am aware of that. Personally, I am only too ready to consider all your claims carefully and deduct what is right from the total before putting out in my own claim. However, you don't know Thorin Oakenshield as well as I do, I assure you. He is quite ready to sit on a heap of gold and starve, as long as you sit there. Oh, let him, said Bard. Such a fool deserves to starve. Quite so. I see your point of view. At the same time, winter is coming fast. Before long, you will be having snow and whatnot, and supplies will be difficult. Even for elves, I imagine. And there will be difficulties. You have not heard of Dwayne and the dwarves coming to the hills. Of the Iron Hills. We have a long time ago. Well, what has he got to do with us? Said the king. I thought as much. I see. I have information you have not got, Dwayne. I might tell you is less than 2 days' march off. He has at least 500 grim dwarfs with him. A good many of them have experience in the dreadful dwarf and goblin wars, of which you have no doubt heard. When they arrive, there may be serious trouble. Why do you tell us? What's this? Are you betraying your friends, or you're threatening us? Asked Bard. My dear Bard, don't be so hasty. I've never met such a suspicious folk. I am merely trying to avoid trouble for all concerned. Now, I will make you an offer. Let's hear it. You may see it. It is this. He drew forth the Arkstone and threw it away in the wrapping. The Elven King himself, whose eyes were used to things of wonder and beauty, stood up in amazement. Even Bard gazed marvelously in silence, as if it was a globe held full with the moonlight, and hung before them in a net of woven of the glint of frozen stars. Frosty stars, my bad. This is the Arkstone of Thorin, said Bilbo, the heart of the mountain. It is also the heart of Thorin. He values it above a river of gold. I give it to you. It will aid in your bargaining. Then Bilbo, not without a shudder or a glance of longing, handed the marvelous stone to Bard, and held it in his hand as though dazed. But how is it yours to give? He asked, with a little effort. Oh, well, said the hobbit uncomfortably. It isn't exactly. But well, I'm willing to let it stand against my claim. Don't you know, I may be a burglar, or so they say. Personally, I never really felt like one. But I am an honest one, I hope, more or less. Anyway, I'm going back now, and the dwarves do what they like to me. I hope they'll find it useful. The Elven King looked at Bilbo with a new wonder. Bilbo Baggins, she said. You are more worthy to wear the armor of elf princess than many that looked the many that have looked ever calmly in it. But I wonder if Thorin Oakenshield will see it so. I have knowledge of the dwarves in general that you have perhaps. I advise you to remain with us, and there you should be honored and thrice welcome. Thank you very much, I'm sure, said Bilbo. But I think I ought to leave my friends this. After all, we've come through together, and I promised to wake Bumber at midnight, too. Really, I must be going, and quickly. Nothing they could say would stop him, so an escort was provided for him. As he went, both the king and Bard saluted him with honor. As they passed through the camp, an old man wrapped in a dark cloak rose from the tent door where he was sitting, and he came towards them. Well done, Mr. Baggins, he said, clamping Bilbo on the back. There's always much more than you than anything else. Anything expects. It was Gandalf. For the first time for many days, Bilbo was really delighted, but there was no time for all questions that he immediately wished to ask. All in good time, said Gandalf. Things were drawing towards the end now. Unless I'm mistaken, there is an unpleasant time just in front of you. Keep your heart up. You may come through all right. There is news brewing that even the ravens have not heard. Good night. Bilbo, puzzled but cheered, Bilbo hurried on. He was guided to the safe ford and across dry. Then he said farewell to the elves and climbed carefully back towards the gate. Great weariness began to come over him, but it was well before midnight when he clambered up the rope again. It was still where he had left it. He untied it and hid it, and then he sat down on the wall and wondered anxiously what would happen next. At midnight, he woke Bumber, and then in turn rolled himself into a corner, but listening to the old dwarf's thanks, which he felt he had hardly earned. He was soon fast asleep, forgetting all his worries till morning. As a matter of fact, he was dreaming of eggs and bacon. Almost there, almost there. The Cloud Burst, Chapter 17. The next day, the trumpets rang early in the camp. A single runner was seen hurrying along the narrow path. At a distance, he stirred and hailed them, asking whether Thorin would now listen to another assembly, since new tidings had come in hand. And matters were changed. That'll be Dwyer, said Thorin when he heard. They will have got wind of his coming, and I thought they would alter his mood. Bid them come a few in number and weaponless, and I will hear, he called to the messenger. About midday, the banners of the forest and the lake were seen to be borne forth again. A company of 20 were approaching. At the beginning of the narrow, there they laid aside their sword and spear, and they came towards the gate. Wondering, the dwarfs saw among them were both Bard and the Elven King, before whom an old man wrapped in an old cloak and hood bore a strong casket of iron-bound wood. Hail, Thorin, are you still the same of mind? My mind does not change with the rising and setting of a few suns, said Thorin. Did you focus? Did you come to ask me idle questions? Still, the elf host has not departed as I bade. Till then you come in vain to bargain with me. Is there nothing for which you would yield any of your gold? Nothing that you and your friends have to offer. What are the Arkstone of Theron? Said he. At the same moment the old man opened the casket and aloft the jewel. The light leapt from his hand and brightened the white in the morning. Then Thorin was stricken dumb with amazement and confusion, and no one spoke for a long while. Thorin at length broke his silence, and his voice was thick with wrath. That stone was my father's, and is mine. Why should I purchase my own? But wonder overcame him, and he added, But how come you by the heirloom of my house? Is there no need to ask question of thieves? We are not thieves, Bard answered. Your own we will give back in return for our own. How come you buy it? Thorin in great rage. I gave it to them, squeaked Bilbo, who was peeping over the wall, now in dreadful fright. You, you, cried Thorin, turning upon him and gasping with both hands. You miserable hobbit, you unseized burglar, he shouted at loss of words, and shook poor Bilbo like a rabbit. By the by the beard of Durin, I wish I had Gandalf here, person for his choice of you. May his beard wither, and as for you, I will show you to the rocks, cried, and lifted Bilbo in his arms. Stay, your wish is granted, said a voice. The old man with the casket threw aside his hood and cloak. Here is Gandalf, and none too soon, it seems. If you don't like my burglar, please don't damage him. Put him down and listen first to what he has to say. You're all in league, said Thorn, dropping Bilbo on top of the wall. Never again will I have dealings with any wizard or his friends. What have you say? Have you to say, you descendant of rats? Dear me, dear me. I am sure this is all very uncomfortable. You remember saying that I might choose my own 14th share. Perhaps I took too literally. I have been told the dwarves were sometimes politer in words than in deed. That time was all the same when you seemed to think I had some service. Descendants of rats, indeed. Is there still service? It's you and your family that I promised, Thorin? Take it that I have disposed of my share as I wished, and let it go as I will. And I go with that. I will, said Thorin grimly. And I will let you go at that. And may we never meet again. And then he turned and spoke over the wall. I am betrayed, he said. It was rightly guessed that I could not forbear nor redeem the Arkstone or treasure of my house. For it, I will give 1/14th share of the hoard in silver and gold, setting aside gems. That fourth shall be accounted and promised share of this traitor. And from that reward he shall depart, and you can divide it as you will. You will get little enough, I doubt it. I doubt not. Take him, if you wish him to live, and no friendship of mine goes with him. Go down now to your friends, he said to Bilbo, or shall I throw you down? What about the gold and silver? That shall follow after, as can be arranged, said he. Get down. Until then, we keep the stone. You're not making a very splendid figure as king under the mountain, said Gandalf. But things may yet change. They may indeed, said Thorin, and already so strong was the bewilderment of the treasure upon him. He wondered whether by the Dwayne he might recapture the Arkstone and withhold the share of the reward. As Bilbo swung down from the wall and departed, with nothing for all his trouble except the armor which Thorin had already given him, more than one of the dwarves in their hearts felt shame and pity in his going. Farewell, he cried to them. We may meet again as friends. Be off. You have mail upon you for what is made by folk. It is too good for you. It cannot be pierced by arrows, but if you do not hasten, it will sting your miserable feet. So be swift. Not so hasty, said Bard. We will give you until tomorrow. At noon we will return and see if you have brought from the hoard the portion that is set against stone. And if that is done without deceit, then we will depart, and the elf host will go back to the forest. In the meanwhile, farewell. With that, they went back to the camp, but Thorin sent messengers by Rourke to tell Dwayne what had passed, and bidding him to come with wary speed. That day he passed in the night. The next day the wind shifted west, and the air was dark and gloomy. The morning was still early when a cry was heard in the camp. Runners came to report the horse of dwarfs had appeared. It around the eastern spur of the mountain, and it was now hastening to Dale. Diane had come. He had hurried through the night, and so he came sooner than expected. Each one of his folk was clad in a hauberk of steel of mail that hung to his knees, and legs were covered with a horse of fine and flexible metal mesh, the secret of whose making was possessed by Dwayne's people. The dwarves were exceedingly strong. sitting strong for their height, but most of them were strong even for dwarves. In the battle, they wielded two-handed matocks. What the hell are matocks? Hold on, I want to. My brain is curious. I am curious what a matok is. Let's find out. Oh. Digging. Oh, okay. So it's basically like a pickaxe. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So they're wielding pickaxes. Swords. Where was I? Talks. Both of which had also a short broadsword at his side. Okay, so they have pickaxes and broadsword. Interesting. And a round shield slung on his back. Their beards were forked and pleated, thrust into their belts. Their caps were of iron, and they strode off with iron, and their faces were grim. Trumpets called men and elves to arms. Before long, the dwarves could be seen coming up the valley at a great pace. They halted between the river and the eastern spur, but a few held on their way, and crossing the river drew the camp. And there they laid down their weapons and held up their hands in a sign of peace. Bard went down to meet with them, and him with Bilbo. We were sent by Dwayne, son of Nain, they said. We are hastening to our kinsmen in the mountain, since we learn that the kingdom of old is renewed. But who are you that sit in the plainest foes as before defending walls? This, of course, in the polite and rather old-fashioned language of such an occasion meant simply, you have no business here. We are going on, and so make way, or we shall fight you. They might push on between the mountain and loop around the river, for the narrow land they did not seem to strongly guard it. Bard, of course, refused to allow the dwarves to go straight onto the mountain. He was determined to wait until the gold and silver had been brought out in exchange for the Arkstone, for he did not believe this would be done once the fortress was manned with such large warlike of a company. They had brought with them a great store of supplies, for the dwarves could carry very large, very heavy burdens, and nearly all of Dwayne's folk, in spite of their rapid march, bore huge packs on their backs, in addition to their weapons. They would stand a siege for weeks, and by that time, yet more dwarves would come, yet more, for Thorin had many relatives. Also, they would be able to reopen and guard some other gates, so that besiegers would have to encircle the whole mountain, and for that they had not sufficient numbers. These were in fact precisely the plans, for the Raven messengers had been busy between Thorin and Dane, but for the moment the way was barred. So after angry words, the Dwarven messengers retired, muttering in their beards. Bard then sent messengers at once to the gate, but they found no gold nor payment. Arrows were come forth as soon as they were within shot, and they hastened back in dismay. In the camp all was astir, as if for battle. The dwarves of Dwayne were advancing along the eastern bank. Fools, said Pard, come thus beneath the mountain's arm. They don't understand the war above ground. Whatever they know of battle in the mines, there are many of our archers and spearmen now hidden in the rocks upon their right flank. Dwarf mail may be good, but they will soon be hard to put back. Dwarf mail may soon be good, but they will soon be hard put it to it. Let us set on them now from both sides before they are fully rested. But the Elven King said, long I will tarry, ere I begin this war for gold. The dwarves cannot press us unless we will, or do anything that we cannot mark. Let us hope there is still let us hope still for something. that will bring reconciliation. Our advantage in numbers will be enough, if in the end it comes to unhappy blows. But he reckoned without the dwarves. The knowledge that the Arkstone was in the hands of the besiegers burned in their thoughts. And they also guessed the hesitation of Bard and his friends, and resolved to strike while they debated. Suddenly, without a signal, they sprang silently to attack. Bows twanged and bows whistled, and the battle was about to be joined. Still more suddenly, darkness came without dreadful swiftness. A black cloud hurried over the sky. Winter thunder and a wild wind rolled roaring up and rumbled into the mountain. A lightning lit its peak, and beneath the thunder, other blackness could be seen whirling forward. But it did not come with wind; it came with the north, like a vast cold cloud of birds, so dense that no light could see beneath their wings. "Halt!" cried Gandalf, who appeared suddenly and stood alone with arms lifted between the advancing dwarves and the ranks awaiting them. "Halt!" he cried, and another voice of thunder, his staff blazed forth with the flash of lightning. "Dread has come upon you all, alas. It has come more swiftly than I guess. The goblins that are upon you, the log of the north is coming your way, whose father you slew in Moria. Behold, the bats are about of his army are like a sea of locusts. They ride upon wolves and wargs are in their train." Amazement and confusion fell upon them all. Even as Gandalf had been speaking, the dwarfs grew. The dwarfs halted and gazed at the sky. The dwarfs halted with many. The sky, the elves cried out with many voices. "Come, there is time yet for council. Let Dwayne, son of Nain, come swiftly." So began a battle that none had expected. It was called the Battle of. Okay, so that's where the third movie, which I can never watch. I don't think I can ever watch the Hobbit movies. If I'm being honest, I could never watch those movies. I love the first three Lord of the Rings movies, but I don't think I could watch the Hobbit trilogy. But in any case, let us continue. Battle of the Five Armies. And it was very terrible. On one side were goblins and the wild wolves, and upon the other were elves, men, and dwarves. This is how it fell. Ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, the hatred of their races for the dwarves had rekindled to fury. Messengers had passed to and fro between all their cities, colonies, and strongholds. They resolved now to win the domain of the north. Tidings they had gathered in secret ways, and all in the mountains they were forging and armoring. Then they marched and gathered by hill and valley, going in by tunnel or under dark until round and beneath the great mountain Gundabad, okay. Gundabad in the north, where there was their capital. A vast host assembled, ready to sweep down in time of storm and unawares upon the south. Then they learned of the death of Smog, and joy was in their hearts, and they hastened night after night through the mountains, and came thus on a sudden from the north, hard on the heels of Dwayne. Not even the ravens knew of their coming until they came out of the broken lands, which divided the lonely mountain from the hills behind. How much Gandalf knew could not be said, but it is plain that he had not expected a sudden assault. This is the plan that he had made in council with the Elven King, with Bard, and with Dwayne. But the Dwarf Lord now joined them. The goblins were foes of all, and at the coming of all their quarrels were forgotten. Their only hope was to lure the goblins into the valley between the arms of the mountain, and themselves to man the great spurs and strike southeast. Yet this would be perilous, and the goblins were in sufficient numbers to overrun the mountain itself, and still attack them also from behind and above. But there was no time to make any other plan or summon any help. Soon the thunder passed, rolling away to the southeast. But the bat cloud came, flying lower over the shoulder of the mountain, and whirled above them, shutting out the light and filling them with dread. To the mountain, called Bard, to the mountain. Let us take our place where there is still yet time. On the southern spur, or in its lower slopes, and in the rocks at its feet, the elves were set. And the east spur were men and dwarves, but Bard, and some of the nimblest men and elves climbed to the height of the eastern shoulder to gain a view of the north. Soon they could see the lands before the mountains' feet, with huddling multitude. Ere the long vanguard swirled round with the spur's end, and came rushing into Dale. These were the swiftest wolf riders, and though already their cries and howls rent the air afar, a few brave men were strung before them to make a feint of resistance, and many were fell before the rest drew back and fled to your side. As Gandalf had hoped, the goblin army had gathered behind and rested behind the resisted vanguard and army. Yep, an army had gathered behind Moses' vanguard and poured out and raged into the valley, driving wildly between the arms of the mountain, seeking for their foe. Their banners were countless, black and red, and they came like a tide in fury and disorder. It was a terrible battle, the most dreadful of all Bilbo's experiences, and the one which at the time he hid most, which was to say, it was the one he was most proud of and most fond of recalling long afterwards, although he was most quite unimportant in it. Actually, I must see he put it on his ring earlier in the business and vanished from sight, if not from all danger. A magic ring of that sort is not complete protection in a goblin charge, nor does it stop flying arrows and wild spears, but it does help in getting out of the way and prevents your head from being specially chosen for a sweeping stroke by a goblin swordsman. The elves were first to charge, their hatred for the goblins is cold and bitter, their spears and swords shone in the gloom with a gleam of a chill flame. So deadly was the wrath of the hands that held them. As soon as the host of their enemies was dense in the valley, they sent against it a shower of arrows, as each flickered as it fled, as if with stinging fire. Behind the arrows were thousands of spearmen that leapt down in charge. Their yells were deafening, and their rocks were stained black with goblin blood. Just as the goblins were recovering from the onslaught, and the elf charge was halted, there rose from across the valley a deep threatened roar, with the cries of Moria and Dwayne and Dwayne. The dwarves in the Iron Hills plunged in, wielding their mattocks. At this point, you might as well just call them pickaxes. That's pretty much what they are. Upon the other side, and beside them came the men of the lake with long swords. Panic came among the goblins, and even they turned to meet this new attack. The elves charged again with renewed numbers. Already many of the goblins were flying back down the river to escape from the trap, and many of their own wolves were turning upon them, rendering the dead and the wounded. And victory seemed at hand when a cry came out from the heights above. Goblins had scaled the mountains from the other side, and then already many were on the slopes of the gate, and others were streaming down recklessly, heedless of those that fell screaming from a cliff and precipice to attack the spurs from above. Each of these would have reached by the paths that ran down the main mass of the mountain in the centra. The defenders had too few to bar the way for long. Victory now vanished from hope. They had only stemmed the first onslaught of the black tide. Day drew on. The goblins gathered again in the valley. There, a host of wargs came ravaging with them With them came with a body of guard of blog goblins of huge size with scimitars of steel. Soon actual darkness was coming into a stormy sky. While still the great bats swirled about the heads and ears of the elves and men were fastened vampire-like on the stricken. And now Bard was fighting to defend the eastern spur, and yet not given slowly back. And the elf lords were busy at bay about their king upon the southern arm, now watching southern arm near the watching post in Ravenhill. Suddenly there was a great shout from the gate came a great trumpet. They had forgotten about Thorin. Part of the wall made of by levers fell outward, and with a crash into the pool, out leapt the king of the mountain, and his companions followed him. Hood and cloak were gone, they were in shining armor, and red light leaped from their eyes. In the gloom, the great dwarf gleamed like gold in a dying fire. Rocks were hurled down from the high by the goblins above, but they held on, leapt down to the fall's foot, and rushed forward to the battle. Wolf and rider fell and fled before them. Thorin wielded his axe with mighty strokes, and nothing seemed to harm him. To me, elves and men, to me, my own kingsfolk, he cried. His voices shook like a horn in the valley. Down, heedless of order, rushed all the dwarves Dwayne to his help. Came many of the Lakemen, for Bard could not restrain them. And out on the other side came many of the spearmen of the elves. Once again, the goblins were stricken in the valley, and they were piled in heaps until Dale was dark and hideous with corpses. The warwick scattered, and Thorin drove right against the bodyguards of Bolg. Bolg? B-O-L-G? Bolg. Bolg. Why am I trying to say this with an accent? There's no reason to say this with an accent. But he could not pierce their ranks. Already behind them, the goblin dead had laid many men and dwarves, and many a fair elf that should have lived yet long ages merrily in the wood. And yet, as the valley widened, his onset grew very slow. His numbers were too few, his flanks were unguarded. Soon the attackers were attacked. They were forced into a great ring, faced every way, and heamed all about with goblins and wolves returning to the onslaught. The bodyguard of Bolg came hurling against them, and drove in upon their ranks like waves upon cliffs of sand. Their friends could not help them, for the assault from the mountain was renewed with redoubled force, and upon either side men of elves were slowly beaten down. On all this, Bilbo looked with misery. He had taken his stand on Ravenhall among the elves, partly because there was more of a chance to escape from that point, and partly, with more the Tukish side part of his mind, because if he was going to be in a last desperate stand, he appeared to... come on. He preferred on the whole defending the Elven King. Gandalf, too, I may say, was there, sitting on the ground as if in deep thought, preparing, I suppose, some last bit of magic before the end. That did not seem far off. It would not be long now, thought Bilbo, before the goblins come in the gate. We're all slaughtered or driven down or captured. Really, it is enough to make one weep. After all was gone through, I would rather old Smog had left with all the wretched treasure than these vile creatures should get it. Poor old Bumber and Balin and Feely and Keely and all the rest come to a bad end, and Bard too, and the Lakemen, and the Merry Elves. Misery me, I have come to songs of many a battle. I've always understood that defeat may be glorious. It seems very uncomfortable to say not to say distressing. I wish you were out. Clouds were torn by the wind, and a red sunset slashed the west. Seeing the sunny gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked around. He gave a great cry and saw the sight that made his heart leap. Dark shapes, yet small, yet majestic, against the small, distant gleam. The eagles! The eagles! He shouted. The eagles are coming! Actually, I'd probably have to reread the third book. Never even finished reading that. That's weird. Story for after we are done. Bilbo's eyes were suddenly wrong. The eagles were coming down with wind, line after line, in such a host as much have gathered from all the areas of the north. The eagles! The eagles! Bilbo cried, dancing and waving his arms. If the elves could not see them, they could hear him. Soon they took up the cry and it echoed across the valley. Many wandering eyes looked up, though as yet nothing could be seen except from the southern shoulders of the mountain. Just real quick. That is not a good position to be sitting in for that long. We were almost done. 4 chapters and we are done. Said once more, but at the moment a stone hurled from above smote heavily on his helm, and he fell with a crash and knew no more. Poor Bilbo. When Bilbo came to himself, he was literally by himself. He was lying on the flat stones of Ravenhill, and no one was near. A cloudless day, but cold, and broad was above him. He was shaking and chilled as stone, but his head burned with fire. How I wonder what happened, he said to himself. At any rate, I am not yet one of the fallen heroes, but I suppose there is still time enough for that. He sat up painfully. Looking into the valley, he could see no living goblins. After a while, his head had cleared a little. He thought he could see elves moving on the rocks below. He rubbed his eyes. Surely there was a camp still on the plain distance off. And there was a coming and going at the gate. Dwarfs seemed to be busy removing the wall, but it was deadly still, and there was no call and no echo of song. Sorrow seemed to be in the air. Victory after all, I suppose, he said, feeling his aching head. Well, it seems very gloomy business. Suddenly, he was aware of a man climbing up, going towards him. Hello there, he said in a shaky voice. Oh, there, what news? What voice is it that speaks among the stones? Said the man halting, peering about him not far from where Bilbo sat. I'll be blessed. Then Bilbo remembers, I'll be blessed, he said. This invisibility has drawbacks after all. Otherwise, I suppose I might have spent a warm and uncomfortable night in bed. It is me, Bilbo Baggins, company of Thurin, he cried, hurriedly taking off the ring. It is all well that I found you, said the man, striding forward. You are needed, and we have looked for you long. You would have been numbered among the dead, or many, if Gandalf the Wizard had not said that your voice was last heard in this place. I have been sent to look here for the last time. Are you much hurt? Just a nasty knock on the head, I think, said Bilbo. But I have a helm and a hard skull. All the same, I feel sick and my legs are like straw. I will carry you down to the camp in the valley, said the man, picking him up lightly. The man was swift and sure-footed. It was not long before Bilbo sat down before a tent in Dale. There's Sir Gandalf with his arm in his sling. Even the wizard had not escaped without a wound, and there was few unarmed in all the host. When Gandalf saw Bilbo, he was delighted. Baggins, he exclaimed, alive after all, I am glad. I began to wonder if even your luck would see you through. Terrible business and nearly was disastrous. But other news can wait. Come, he said gravely. You are called for. Leading the hobbit, he took him within the tent. Hail Thorin, he said as he entered. I have brought him. There indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield, wounded with many wounds. His rent armor and unnotched axe were cast down upon the floor. He looked up as Bilbo came inside. Farewell, good thief, said. I go now to the halls of waiting to sit beside my fathers. Until the world until the world is renewed. Since I leave now all gold and silver and go where it is little worth, I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate. Bilbo knelt on one knee and filled with sorrow. Farewell, King under the mountain. This is a bitter adventure. If it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it, yet I am glad that I have shared with you shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves. No, said Thorin. There is no more in you of good than you know. Or there is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world.
All right. Thanks for stopping by.
I don't know. Sighed Miri, I must leave it farewell. Then Bilbo turned away and went by himself and sat alone, wrapped in a blanket. And whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul indeed. It was a long before he had heart to make joke again. A mercy it is, he said at last to himself, that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorn was still living. But I am glad that we parted in kindness. You were a fool, Bilbo Baggins. You made a great mess of that business with the stone. And there was a battle, in spite all of your efforts to buy a peace and quiet. But I suppose you can hardly be blamed for that. All that happened after he was stunned. Bilbo learned later. All that happened after he was stunned, Bilbo learned later, but it gave him much more sorrow than joy. He was now weary of his adventure, and he was aching in his bones for the homeland journey. That, however, was a little delayed, so in the meantime, I will tell you something of the events. The eagles had long suspicion of the goblins' mustering, for their watchfulness of the movements of the mountains could not be altogether hid, so that they had gathered in great numbers under the great eagle of the misty mountain, and at length smelling the battle afar, they had come speeding down the gale in the nick of time. It was dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over the precipices, or driving them down shrieking and bewildering among their foes. It was not long before they freed the lowly mountain, and elves and the men on either side of the valley could come out to last to help the battle below. But even with the eagles, they were still outnumbered. In that last hour, Bjorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or where from. He came alone and in the bear shape. He seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns. He tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear and broke like a clap of thunder throughout the ring. The dwarves were making a loud standstill about their lords, and upon a low rounded hill, then Bruin stopped and lifted Thorm, who had fallen pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled, so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard and pulled down Brolog himself and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins, and they fled in all directions. But weariness left their enemies with the coming of new hope. They pursued them closely and prevented most of them from escaping where they could, drove many of them into the running river, and such fled south and west as they hunted into the marshes of the forest river, and there the great part of the last fugitives perished. While those that came hardly to the Wood Elves' realm were slain or drawn in to die in the trackless dark of the Mirkwood, songs have said that parts of the goblin warriors of the north perished on that day, and the mountains had peace for many a year. Victory has been assured before the fall of the night, but pursuit was still afoot. When Bilbo returned to the camp, and not many were in the valley save more than grievously wounded. How were the eagles? He asked Gandalf that evening, as he lay lapped in warm blankets. Some are in the hunt, said the wizard. But most have gone back to their eyries. They will not stay here, and have departed to first light morning. Going as Count Chief Keith with Golden sworn friendship with them forever. I'm sorry, I mean, I should have liked to see them him again, said Bilbo sleepily. Perhaps I shall see them on the way home, I suppose. On the way, I suppose I shall be going home soon. As soon as you like, said the wizard. Actually, it was some days before Bilbo really set out. They buried Thorn deep beneath the mountain, and Bard laid the Arkstone on his breast. There let it lie till the mountain falls. May it bring good fortune to all his folk that dwell hereafter. Upon his tomb, the king then laid Orcrish, the elfish sword, for they had taken Thorn in his captivity. It is said in songs that it gleamed ever in the dark if if foes approached. And the fortress of the dwarves could not be taken by surprise. There now Dwayne, son of Nain, took up his abode and became king under the mountain, and in time many other dwarves gathered to his throne in ancient halls. Of the 12 companies of Thorin, 10 remained. Feely and Keely had fallen, defending him with shield and body, for he was their mother's eldest brother, and others remained with Dwayne, for Dwayne dealt his treasure well. There, of course, was no longer any question of dividing the treasure in such shares as planned. To Balin and Dwalin and Dory and Nori and Ori and Oim, and Gloin and Buford, Bulfer and Bumber, or to Bilbo. Yet a 14th share of all the silver and gold, wrought and unwrought, was given up to Bard. For Dwayne said, "We will honor the agreement of the dead," and he is now the Arkstone in his keeping. Even a 14th share was wealth exceedingly greater than that of the mortal kings. For that treasure Bard sent much gold to the master of Lake Town and rewarded his followers and friends freely. To the Elven King he gave the emblems of Girion, such jewels he'd most love, which Jean had restored to him. To Bilbo he said, "This treasure is as much as yours as mine, though the old agreement cannot stand, since so many have a claim in its winnings and defense. Yet, even though you were willing to lay aside your claim, I should wish there was a Theron Thorin, of which he repented, should not prove true. That we should give you a little, I would reward you most truly of all." "Very kind of you," said Bilbo. "But really, it is a relief to me how on earth, shall I have got all the treasure home without war and without murder all along the way. I don't know. And I don't know what I should have done with it when I got home. I'm sure it is better in your hands." In the end, he would only take 2 small chests, one filled with silver, the other with gold, such as one strong pony could carry. "That will be quite as much as I can manage," said he. At last, the time he came to say goodbye to his friends. Farewell, Dwalin, fellow Dory, Nori, Ori, On, Glowing, Buford, Bumper, and Bumber. I don't know why I always put an X on the end of that, but I always do. Hmm. Let me take a picture. Water. Let's get into the mountainside. May your beards never grow thin. And turning towards the mountain, he added, "Farewell, Thor and Oakenshield, and Feely and Keely. May your memories may never fade." And then the dwarves bowed and lowered their head before their gate. But words stuck their throats. "Goodbye and good luck wherever you fare," said Balin at last. "If you ever visit us again, when our halls are made fair once more, then the feast shall indeed be splendid. If you're ever passing my way, don't wait to knock. Tea is at 4, but if any of you are welcome any time." And then he turned away. The elf host was on the march. If it was sadly lessened, yet many were glad, for now the northern world would be merrier for a long day. The dragon was dead, and the goblins were overthrown. Their hearts looked forward after winter to spring of joy. Gandalf and Bilbo rode behind the Elven King. Behind him stood Bjorn once more in man shape. He laughed and sang aloud on the road, so that it went on until they drew nearer to the borders of Mirkwood, to the north place of the forest, and ran out. Then they halted, for the wizard and Bilbo would not enter the wood, even though the king bade them stay a while in his halls. They intended to go along the edge of the woods and round out to its northern end in waste that lay between it and begin in the beginning of the Grey Mountains. It was a long and cheerless road, but now the goblins were crushed. It seemed safer for them than dreadful pathways underneath the trees. Moreover, Born was going that way too. Farewell, old Elven King, said Gandalf. Merry be the green wood, while the world is yet young, and merry all your folk. Farewell, old Gandalf, said the king. May you ever appear where you are most needed and least expected. The oftener you appear in my halls, the better I shall be pleased. I beg of you, said Bilbo, stammering steadily one foot, to accept this gift. He brought out a necklace of silver and pearls that Dwayne had given him at their parting gift. In what way shall I earn this gift, O Hobbit? Have I earned this gift, O Hobbit? Said the king. Well, I thought, don't you know? Confused that, some little return should be made for your hospitality. I mean, even a burglar has his feelings. I have drunk much of your wine and eaten much of your bread. I will take your gift, O Bilbo the Magnificent, said the king, and I shall name you elf friend, and blessed may your shadow ever and blessed. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell. Then the elves turned towards the forest, and Bilbo started his long journey home. He had many hardships and adventures before he got back. The wild was still the wild, and there were many other things in those days besides goblins. But he was well guided and well guarded. The wizard was with them, and Bjorn for much of the way, and he was never in great danger again. Anyway, by midwinter, Gandalf and Bilbo had come all the way back along both edges of the forest to the doors of Bjorn's house, and there, for a while, both had stayed. Yuletide was warm and merry there, and the men came from far and wide to feast at Bjorn's bidding. The goblins in the misty mountains were now fewer and terrified, and in the deepest holes they could find, and wargs had vanished from the woods, so that men went abroad without fear. Bjorn indeed became a great chief afterwards in those regions, and ruled a wide land between the mountains and the wood. But it is said that for many generations the men of his line had the power of taking bear shape, and some were grim men and bad, but most were heart like Bjorn, if less in size and strength. In their day, the last goblins were hunted from the misty mountains, and a new peace came along the edge of the wild. It was sprung. It was sprung. Spring. Spring. Ah. It was spring and a fair one, with mild weathers and bright sun, before Bilbo and Gandalf took their leave at last of Bjorn, and though he longed for home, Bilbo left with regret, for the flowers of the gardens of Bjorn were in springtime and no less marvelous than in high summer. At last they had come upon the long road and reached there, the very pass where the goblins had captured them before. But they came out at the high point at morning. Looking backward, they saw white suns shining over the outstretched lands. There behind lay Mirkwood, blue in the distance, and darkly green at the nearer edge in the spring. There, farther away, was the lonely mountain at the edge of the eyesight. On its highest peak, snow yet unmelted was gleamingly pale. So comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their endings, said Bilbo, as he turned his back on his adventure. The Duke's part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. I wish now only to be in my own armchair. Chapter 19. The Last Stage. It was May the 1st that the two came back to the last brink of the Valley of Rivendell. where stood the last or first homely house. Again, it was evening and their ponies were tired, especially when one was carrying the baggage. They all felt in need of rest. As they rode down the steep path, Bilbo heard the elves singing in their trees, as if they had not stopped since he left. As soon as their riders came down into the lower glades, hey, I must double check to make sure that there is not a bad word in this.
Okay, we are good.
There's something like this. The dragon is withered, his bones are now crumbled, his armor is shrivered, his his splendor is humbled. Though the sword shall be rusted, and the throne and crown perish, with the strength that men trusted and the wealth that they cherished. There's here grass is still growing, and leaves still swinging, and the white water flowing, and the elves yet singing. Come, tra la la, come down the valley. The stars are far brighter, the gems without measure. The moon is far wider than the silver and treasure. The fire is more shining on the hearth in the gloaming than the gold won by mining. So what are you roaming? Oh, tra la la la, come down back to the valley. Oh, what are we going so late in return? The river is flowing, the stars all a burning. Oh, whither so laden, so sad and so dreary? Here are dear elf and elf maiden, now welcome the weary with a tra la 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 la. Come back down the valley. Tra la la la, fa la la la, fa la. Then the elves of the valley came out and greeted them and led them across the water to the house of Elrond. There a warm welcome was made them, and there are many eager ears that was evening and there are many eager ears that evening to hear the tale of their adventures. Gandalf it was who spoke, for Bilbo had fallen quite quiet and drowsy. Most of the tale he knew, for he had been in it, and he himself told too much of it to the wizard on their way home, or in the house of Bjorn. But every now and then and again, he would open one eye and listen when part of the story which he had not yet known came in. It was in this way he learned where Gandalf had been too, for he overheard the words of the wizard to Elrond. It appeared that Gandalf had been into a great council of the White Wizards, masters of lore and magic, and that they had Blaster the necromancer from his dark hold in the south of Mirkwood. Ere along now, said Gandalf, the forest will grow somewhat more wholesome. The north will be freed from that horror for many long years, I hope. Yet I wish he was banished from the world. It would be well indeed, said Elrond, but I fear that will not come in the age of this world, for many after. Yet, with the tale of their journeys, these were told, and there were other tales, yet more tales along the way, and tales of new things, and tales of no time at all, till Bilbo's head was filled forward, till Bilbo's head fell forward on his chest, and he snored comfortably in the corner. He woke to find himself in a white bed, and the moon shining through the opening. Shining through the opening window. Below, no many it's not again. Okay, we're good. Males were singing loud with their banks in them. Sing all joyful, sing all together. The winds in the treetops, the winds in the heather. The stars are in blossom, the moon is in flower, and bright are the windows of the night in her tower. Dance all joyful, now dance all together. Soft is the grass, let your foot be like feather. If the river is silver, the shadows fleeting, merry is Maytime and merry is our meeting. Sing we now softly in dreams, let us weave for him. Wind him slumber, and there let us leave him. The wanderer sleep, now soft be his pillow. Lullaby, lullaby, Eldil and willow. Sigh no more pine till the wind of the morn. All moon dark be the land. Hush, hush, oak and ash and thorn. Hush be all water till while dawn is at hand. "Oh, merry people," said Bilbo, looking out. "What time by moon is this? Your lullaby would have wakened a drunken goblin, yet I should thank you. And your snores would have wakened a snow dragon, yet we thank you," they answered with laughter. "It is drawing towards dawn, and you have slept now till the night have slept since the night's beginning. Tomorrow perhaps you will be cured of your weariness." "A little sleep does great cure in the house of Elrond," said he. "But I'll take all the cure I can get. A second night fare, friends." And then he went back to bed and slept till late morning. Weariness fell from him soon in that house, and he had a merry jest and dance, and early and late with all the elves of the valley. Yet even now, yet even that place could not long delay him now, and he thought always of his own home. After a week, therefore, he said farewell to Elrond, and giving him such small gifts as he would accept, he rode away with Gandalf. Even as they left the valley, the sky darkened in the west before them, and the wind and rain came to meet them. "Merry is Maytime," said Bilbo, as the rain beat into his face. "But our back is to legends, and we are coming home. I suppose that is our first taste of it. There is a long road yet, but it is the last road," said Bilbo. They came to the river that marked the very edge of the borderland of the wild, and to the ford beneath the steep of the bank, which you remember. The water was swollen both with the melting of the snows and the approach of the summer, and with the day-long rain, but they crossed with some difficulty and pressed forward as evening fell on the last stage of their journey. This was much as it had been before, except the company was smaller and more silent, although this time there were no trolls. At some point on the road, Bilbo recalled the happenings in the woods a year ago. It seemed to him more like 10, so that, of course, he quickly noted the place where the pony when he had fallen in the river, and they had turned aside for their nasty adventure with Tom, Bert, and Bill. That would have been a nice little quiz, which I forgot to do. Not far from the road, they had found the gold of the trolls, which they had buried, still hidden and untouched. "I have enough to last me my time," said Bilbo when they had dug it up. "You better take this, Gandalf. I dare say you find more use for it." "Indeed I can," said the wizard. "But share and share alike. You may find you have more needs than you expect." So they put the golden bags and slung them on the ponies, who were not at all pleased about it. After all, their going was slower. For the most of the time they walked, but the land was green and there was much grass through, which the hobbit strolled along contentedly. He mopped his face with a red silk handkerchief. No, not a single. His face with a No, not a single one of his own had survived. He had borrowed this from Elrond, for now June had brought summer, and the weather was bright and hot again. All things come to the end. And even this story, a day came when at last they were in sight of the country where Bilbo had been born and bred, where the shapes of the land and the trees were as well known to him as his hands and toes. Coming to a rise, he could see his own hill in the distance. He stopped and said, "Roads go ever on, over rock and under tree, but caves where never sun shone, by streams that never found the sea, over snow by winter sown, over snow and by winter sown, and through the merry flowers of June, over grass and over stone, under mountains and the moon, roads go ever on, under cloud and under star, yet feet that wandering have gone, turn at last to home afar, eyes that fire and sword have seen, yet and horror in the halls of stone. Look at last on meadows green and trees and hills they have long last known." Gandalf looked at him. "My dear Bilbo, something is matter with you. You're not a hobbit as you were." And so they crossed the bridge and passed by the mill and the river and came light back to Bilbo's own door. "Bless me, what's going on?" he cried. "There is a great commotion, and people all sorts, respectable and unsuspectable, were thick around outdoor, and many were going in and out, not even wiping their own feet in the map, as Bilbo noticed with annoyance. If he was surprised, there were many more surprises still. He'd arrived back in the middle of an auction. There was a large notice in black and red hung at the gate stating that June in the 22nd Mears' Grub and the Burrows would sell by auction the effects of the late Bilbo Baggins, Esquire of Bag End, Underhill, Hobbiton. The sale commenced at 10 o'clock sharp. It was now nearly lunchtime, and most things had already been sold for various prices for next to nothing to old songs, as it's not unusual at auctions. Bilbo's cousin, the Saxville Baggins, were in fact being busy measuring his room to see if their own furniture would fit. In short, Bilbo was presumed dead, and not everybody said that so was sorry to find the presumption wrong. The return of Bilbo Baggins created quite a disturbance, both underhill and over the hill, and across the water. There was a great deal more than 9 days' wonder. The legal bother indeed lasted for years. It was quite a long time before Mr. Baggins was in fact admitted to be alive again. Wow. That's quite interesting. The people who had specifically a good bargains at the sale took a good deal of convincing, and in the end, to save some time, Bilbo had to buy back quite of his own furniture. Many of his silver spoons mysteriously disappeared and were never accounted for. Personally, he suspected the Saxville Baggins. On their side, they never admitted that the returned Baggins was genuine, and they were not on friendly terms with Bilbo ever after. They really wanted to live in his nice hobbit holes so very much. I would actually love to live in a hobbit hole. I hear those are very nice. Although I probably would prefer if it was more made from my height than be a hobbit. Anyways, indeed, Bilbo found and he had with more spoons, he had lost his reputation. It is true that forever after he remained an elf friend, and the other dwarves and wizards and all folk has ever passed this way, but he was no longer quite respectable. He was in fact held by the hobbits of the neighbors to be queer. Well, ain't nothing wrong with that. Except by his nephews and nieces on the Took side, but even they were not encouraged in their friendship by their elders. I am very sorry to say he did not mind. He was quite content, and the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever after more musical than it had been in the quiet days before the unexpected party. His sword hung over his mantelpiece, his coat of mail arranged on a stand in the hall, until he lent it to a museum. I call shenanigans on that. His gold and silver was largely spent in presents both useful and extravagant, which to a certain extent accounts for the affection of his nephews and nieces. His magic ring he kept in secret, for he chiefly used it when present callers came. He took to writing poetry and visiting the elves, and though many shook their heads and touched their foreheads to say, "Poor Bilbo Baggins," though few believed any of his tales, and he remained very happy to the end of his days, and those were extraordinarily long. One autumn evening, some years afterwards, Bilbo was sitting in his study writing his memoirs. He thought, calling them there and back again. A hobbit's holiday. When there was a ring at the door, it was Gandalf, and it was a dwarf, and the dwarf was actually Balin. "Come in," said Bilbo, and there they were, settled in chairs by the fire. If Balin noticed that Mr. Baggins' waistcoat was a bit more extensive, and had real gold buttons, Bilbo also noticed that Balin's beard was several inches longer, and his jeweled belt was great magnificence. They fell off talking of their times together. Of course, Bilbo asked how things were going in the lands of the mountain. It seems they were going well. Bard had rebuilt the town of Dale, and the man had gathered to him from the lake, and from the south and the west, and all the valley had been tilled again and rich, and the desolation was now filled with birds and blossoms and springs, fruit, and feasting in autumn. And Lake Town was refounded, and was more prosperous than ever, and much wealth went up and down Yeah, went up and down the running river. And there was friendship in those parts between elves and dwarves and men. The old master had come to a bad end. Bard had given him much gold for the help of the lake people. But being the kind that easily catches such disease, he fell over the dragon sickness, under the dragon sickness, and took most of the gold and fled with it, and died of starvation in the waste and deserted by his companions. The new master is of a wiser kind, said Balin, and very popular, for of course he gets most of the credit for the present of prosperity. Make many songs which say that in his days the river runs with gold. Then prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after fashion. Of course, said Gandalf. And why would they not prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. You don't suppose, do you, that all your ventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I'm very fond of you. But you are only quite a little fellow in this world after all. Thank goodness, said Bilbo, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar. And with that, our journey. Move a few things around. Oh, ow, 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 ow. Ugh, I need to learn not to sit like that when I'm reading. I was sitting, kind of was sitting on my. Ow, ow, ow. That's gonna be hard to sit for a bit. I might have to stand up for a couple hours. Ow, 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 ow. I have to stand up for a couple hours. Because that's just ow. Hmm. There, let's see. Who is streaming? Who can we go give some love to? Then, come. If not you. Or I could read y'all over to y'all over to there. Alright. Tomorrow we are going to be going through the tier list of all the 5E spells. All the level 1 5E spells. That was really fun to set up. I'm just gonna say that right now. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, I'm gonna go after all of the first level 5E spells. And then we are gonna go from there. I'm still happy that I was able to get that. I still don't understand why once I'll explain that more tomorrow. What's going on with why there's like there's a weird discrepancy with numbers between spells because one site doesn't want it. Anyways, I am blabbing. But anyway, let's go get this ready started. Tomorrow we're gonna do that, and then we might continue the saga of the Lord of the Rings and go from there. So I shall see you all tomorrow for the tier list. Hopefully we get through that. If we don't get through that, we might just move that to the next week because there's like 79 spells I gotta get through. So we'll go from there. So I'll see y'all tomorrow.